Chapter 1240. Everything was quietly changing. Nan Xiaonan was somewhat dejected as she silently drank a cup of a huatian that she had just made. She felt very pained, as if she had done something useless. There was no need to fabricate any evidence because the body was gone and the bureau couldn't find the identity of this person. Everyone had forgotten what had happened in the factory. Things didn't seem to be the way they were supposed to be, but it seemed that this was the way it was supposed to be. It continued to develop ambiguously, but it wasn't something that she could understand with her current mental acceleration. Nan Xiaonan felt more and more that this person was terrifying. What was terrifying was not the power to destroy the heaven and earth. Nan Xiaonan had not really seen this almighty person's power to destroy the heaven and earth. She only felt that this kind of silent distortion of reality was even more terrifying. Last night, when she came back, the anger and sorrow she felt had disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by a burning passion. Everyone was fully invested in the task of catching Zhu Jinxiang. But was Zhu Jinxiang really the murderer? Would he fall into an even deeper quagmire after finding this person? Nan Xiaonan had an intuition that the truth would always be hidden in silence. That was the part that no one, including herself, could really understand. When would she be able to reach this level? Nan Xiaonan couldn't help thinking about this question. As an undying emperor, her strength had almost reached the peak. She couldn't see where the future lay. She felt that her original body was like the nuclear weapons made by this subworld, which had reached a kind of extreme. But nuclear weapons could only be used for destruction, not for delicate things. In a trance, she vaguely saw a new development. This fascinated her, and she plunged into a new world like a moth darting into a flame. Plunk! At this moment, the cup fell to the ground. The sound made Xiao Bao, who was in the middle of fishing, jump in fright. He turned his head and saw Nan Xiaonan fell to the ground at this time. Immediately, he quivered and rushed up. Dr. Nan, what's wrong with you? Don't scare me. I'm so hungry. Nan Xiaonan's face was pale. Her stomach was twitching and rumbling with hunger. Her cheeks were deeply sunken. In the club's lobby, Chun Mingming and Zhao Lu met again. It had been more than 2 days since they last met. When they met again, Chun Mingming had regained the memories that had been erased before the assessment. I really didn't expect that. You're clearly a blank. Zhao Lu couldn't help but smile bitterly. What was even more unexpected was that in these past few days, he felt that Chun Mingming's abnormality and safety was because he was undergoing a test. And he himself, even more unexpected, actually became a Black Soul envoy in a muddle-headed way. But when he found out that Chun Mingming was only an apprentice Black Soul envoy, he felt that it was inconceivable. Chun Mingming should be more outstanding than him. As for the boss and the servant girl, he had just met them, so it was hard for him to judge their personalities. At this moment, in Luochio's hands, Zhao Lu and Chun Mingming had both completed the transformation into Black Soul envoys. Zhao Lu vaguely felt that his transformation was slightly different from Chun Mingming's, but he couldn't tell exactly where. Then, under the servant girl's hands, a huge black cabinet slowly emerged from the floor. Chun Mingming and Zhao Lu looked at this scene in amazement. It was like a huge safe. This is the Ark of the Covenant. The servant girl smiled and explained, it's used to store the life lantern of the Black Soul envoys. What's the life lantern? Zhao Lu couldn't help but be curious. Chun Mingming just responded in silence, but his eyes subconsciously turned to the servant girl. He knew that in the club's system, he and Zhao Lu seemed to be under the servant girl's management. The life lantern is the place where your memories and souls are stored. The servant girl smiled and said, the Black Soul envoys are not immortal, but with the life lantern in the Ark of the Covenant, even if you die during a mission, the Master can use it to resurrect you again. Of course, whether you're resurrected or not depends on the Master. This was one of the club's tenets. Everything should be a paid service. Every Black Soul envoy had to personally experience the storage of the life lantern. For example, Tei Yinzi, who was the first to be transformed by Boss Luo, had experienced this, including Tai Setsu and Nero later. At this moment, Zhao Lu and Chun Mingming's bodies automatically separated into a light ball. They could feel that this light ball contained everything they had, but it didn't take everything away from them. When the light ball was sent into the Ark of the Covenant, a clearer shackle was clearly imprinted into the depths of their souls. The moment they became black souls, they vaguely felt the existence of this shackle, and now this feeling became more concrete. Zhao Lu and Chun Mingming looked at each other and saw the seriousness in each other's eyes. From this moment on, the two of them were completely controlled by the man in front of them. Their lives and deaths were in his hands, and there was no room for any resistance. Your workplace is almost ready. Before that, you have 12 hours of free time. Luochio smiled and said, "Why don't you familiarize yourself with this body first? Yi, teach them how to use the Black Soul body." From now on, Boss Luo had transformed 5 Black Soul envoys. At this time, Miss Maid's other value was reflected. In a more down-to-earth way of saying, if there was something to do, the secretary would do it. With that, Luochio turned and walked towards a dark door that appeared behind him. This was the critical door that had been opened a long time ago. But at that time, the critical door could only be opened in this subworld. It existed as a network that connected different places to the club. After Luochio's experience of playing with himself in South America, the ability of the critical gate had been upgraded once and could now open other subworlds. The moment he walked into this critical door, Luochio looked back at Yi and said, "After teaching is almost done, come and accompany me." "Okay." Miss Maid held her hands in front of her and nodded elegantly. Some of the use of the Black Soul Envoy's body power didn't need to be taught. For example, Tianzi and Nero. Before they became Black Souls, they were already living beings that belonged to the side of transcendence. Other than power, they had already come into contact with it. Transforming into a Black Soul was just changing from one type of power to another. It was like changing from using francs to using euros. The transformation within was something that one could understand by themselves. For example, Taisetsu, because the amount of alien body source he used was terrifying, he had never come into contact with transcendence. He was thrown into the dimensional crevice by 18 and experienced a long period of potential stimulation. As for Chun Mingming and Zhao Le, they didn't need to undergo Taisetsu's potential stimulation. They only needed to be taught how to use the basic power. They didn't even need to enter the dimensional crevice. In a rectangular space with a white base and a black roof. Flying, the transformation between virtual and real, is the basic ability of all Black Soul envoys. However, the transformation between virtual and real can't allow you to resist all attacks. When the opponent's power exceeds a certain level, it will still directly affect you. The two listened carefully. After all, it was their first time coming into contact with transcendence. It was so incredible. Remember, in theory, there is no upper limit to the power of Black Soul envoys. Only the body of Black Soul envoys can contain an upper limit to the power. If you wish to obtain more strength, you will need to use your achievement points to purchase more foreign source to upgrade your Onyx Soul body. Of course, it's up to you whether to upgrade or not. Because our most basic thing is a transaction, it doesn't mean that it can find more investors just because it is powerful. For example, there was once a Black Soul envoy who became the head of state and obtained a huge number of performance points by waging war and creating the faith of the empire. Zhao Le couldn't help but say, "Head of state, war, the faith of the empire, could it be? Not in this world." Miss Maid said indifferently. In addition, this envoy is already in a state of death. Its life lamp is in the Ark of the Covenant and has not been given a chance to be reborn. Of course, whether it will be reborn in the future, no one knows. It depends on the owner's preference. Zhao Lu slowly sighed and secretly remembered what he had seen so far was just the tip of the iceberg of this shop. Miss Maid continued at this time, although it's not that the powerful Black Soul will get more performance points. One thing is for sure. The more powerful the Black Soul is, the more convenient it is to contact high-quality investors and easier to accept some more difficult missions. What's the highest level? Chen Mingming frowned. Miss Maid smiled slightly. So far, the highest mission is the destruction of the world. This smile was still beautiful, but when Chun Mingming and Zhao Lu looked into her eyes, it made them feel terrified. At first, they didn't feel it, but after transforming into Black Soul envoys, they could clearly feel that this servant girl was hiding a trace of terror. At this moment, Yi clapped her hands, and a thick leather book about 1 centimeter long appeared in front of Chun Mingming and Zhao Lu. You can use this place before you leave to familiarize yourself with your current abilities. You can also take a walk outside to adjust your thoughts. And the book in your hands now is some of the rules of the Black Soul Envoy. Basically, you have a high degree of freedom, and the type of investor you can find is also limited. You can choose as you like. Only one point, as our highest standard, is not to be violated, not to be betrayed, Chun Mingming whispered. Yi smiled slightly and said, both of you have a good ability to accept. Then, you can do whatever you want with the rest of the time. Miss Maid slightly lifted the hem of her skirt with both hands. After saying goodbye, she disappeared in front of the two, in the space with a white bottom and black roof. Only Chun Mingming and Zhao Lu were left. From the time they met until now, they had not had much time to interact. Only now did they have the opportunity to be alone. Zhao Lu knew that Chun Mingming wasn't the kind of person who took the initiative to speak. At this time, he adjusted his glasses and felt that it was better for him to take the initiative. That, Mingming, did you really send me the previous pistol? Chun Mingming didn't speak. He just closed his eyes, and then his body began to mist and then slowly condensed. It took a long time to condense because he wasn't familiar with it. After a while, the condensed body finally turned into a silver pistol and flew in front of Zhao Lu. Zhao Lu widened his eyes. Chun Mingming's voice sounded, "This is what I bought when I traded. It was made with my soul. It seems to have been transformed along with it. However, the killing bullet has changed from the condensation of lifespan to the condensation of performance. If it's an ordinary bullet, there seems to be no limit. It should be calculated according to my physical consumption." Killing bullet. Zhao Lu was stunned. It's a one-hit, one-kill bullet. At the same time, it ignores space and distance. I temporarily call it the killing bullet. Zhao Lu was surprised. He subconsciously picked up the silver pistol and played with it. In just a few seconds, the pistol left Zhao Li's hand and turned into mist again. Chun Mingming returned to his original appearance. At the same time, his expression was somewhat unnatural. Zhao Lu sighed. "You're still the best. With this kind of ability, I don't seem to be special." Chun Mingming didn't say anything. He knew that Zhao Lu was an official Onyx Soul, and he was just an apprentice. "Why did you think of buying such a gun?" Zhao Lu thought for a while and asked. Chun Mingming shook his head. Everyone has something to say in their heart. As for why he wanted to buy such a pistol, probably the person he really wanted to kill was his cowardly self who didn't dare to cry. After experiencing all this, Chun Mingming more or less understood his own feelings. "All right, there are still some things I don't understand." Zhao Lu seemed to have thought of something. "How did you deal with those parts that you took away?" He was talking about Wang Liang's missing body. "Burned it," Chun Mingming said indifferently. Zhao Lu swallowed his saliva. This was really like Chun Mingming's style, straightforward and efficient. But at the same time, he somewhat understood the reason for this action. When the body was missing parts, it would only divert the police's attention, causing the police to fall into the whirlpool of why the murderer did this, constantly spinning in circles. "Wang Liang, was it really you who killed him?" Zhao Lu frowned and asked in a low voice. Chun Mingming looked deeply at Zhao Lu and shook his head. "It wasn't me. When I arrived, he was already dead." "Already dead?" Zhao Lu was startled. Chun Mingming nodded. "I did have the intention to kill him. At that time, the plan also included this part. So before I took action, I did a lot of preparation work. Before December 1st, I tried to sneak into Wang Liang's house and installed a pinhole camera. I planned to find a way to study his behavior and at the same time choose a suitable time. Originally, the video was planned to be sent to the police after Chun Mingming left the country. The worst-case scenario was to use this video to wash away the suspicion of Zhao Lu being the murderer and at the same time create the identity of Blank Lord. After that, Chun Mingming would choose to disappear abroad. The disease he suffered from was incurable. So, he planned to find a place where no one knew him and quietly wait for his death. At the same time, he would leave a memento for his parents. As for now, there was no need for that. As long as his performance was good enough, he could come back often. Then, Zhao opened his mouth. Chun Mingming recalled, that day, when I was visiting Wang Liang, he seemed to suddenly have a headache. Then, he took some painkillers. Not long after, he collapsed and seemed to have fainted. I looked at him for a long time and found that he didn't move. He wasn't even breathing. It didn't seem like he was asleep. So, I went to take a look and found that he was indeed dead. Who killed him? Chun Mingming shook his head. I don't know. But isn't this better? If the murderer isn't the murderer, then this matter will only be shrouded in a layer of mystery that may never be solved. But if you want to know, it's simple. Do some business and use your achievement points to buy. The boss will definitely tell you. The truth is always hidden in silence. Zhao Lu heaved a sigh and smiled bitterly. I'd rather use it to buy something for my sister. A few days ago, in the interrogation room, Brother Long said angrily, I was so angry at that time. Seeing that kid running away, I didn't think too much and just threw a bottle at him. But it was quite accurate. It directly exploded his head. And then, Zhou Yuxing glared at him. Brother Long shrugged. This bastard didn't stop. I chased him all the way, but he still ran away. I was thinking of catching him at his workplace, but I didn't expect to be caught the next day. Ah, sir, do you think this is a meritorious deed? Can my sentence be reduced? Zhou Yuxing said expressionlessly, I don't know. But, according to what you said just now, you are suspected of using violence against others. There is sufficient evidence. Chapter 1241. The moment he stepped into the critical gate, he felt as if he had passed through some kind of thin film, and Luo Chio's heart was filled with a sudden feeling. But it was just like a ripple caused by a drop of rain falling on a calm surface of water. It spread for a moment and then disappeared. The sky was gray, as if there were too many unclean things hidden in the atmosphere. Luochio landed on the roof of a tall building. It was about 60 stories high, but such buildings could be seen everywhere, and the building he was on was not the tallest building in the city. The density of the population made Luochio a little uncomfortable, but there were not many people walking on the streets. They all lived in their own houses. A large number of pipes passed between the buildings. For the people here, it seemed to be a way of travel. Instead, what he saw most on the streets were machines that were cleaning the streets. There were rows of windows that were almost the same, and everywhere he could find the other side of the symmetrical world. There were no mystical existences, but some of the humans had already obtained supernatural powers. It seemed to have been done by modifying their bodies, but it was still in its infancy and had yet to mature. The only thing they could do was to strengthen their bodies slightly, extend their lifespan slightly, and increase the development of their brain slightly. Luochio closed his eyes and felt it all. Information about the world flowed into his cognition bit by bit. It was about the development process and perfection of this subworld. Luochio slowly opened his eyes. I'm almost at my limit. The technology here was much more advanced than the subworld 0003 he was in, but the perfection was lower. Luochio slowly turned around. Spots of blue light condensed in front of him, and a small body appeared before Luochio's eyes. Blue hair and blue eyes, the same face as Araya in subworld 0003. The only difference was probably the clothes. She wore a blue and white tight-fitting outfit. The small girl's delicate body was presented before him as if it was wrapped in a layer of membrane. There was a long wire socket on her buttocks like a tail. Intelligent multi-purpose manager Araya, serial 0311. The tight-fitting girl with the tail of the wire spoke in a tone that Luochio was familiar with. Nice to meet you, esteemed Origin Authority holder. Luochio looked at serial 0311 with interest. Although she was a little different from Araya in subworld 0003, their core was the same. How many times have you been rebooted? Luochio looked at the hazy sky and asked casually. 7 serial 0311 Araya gave an accurate number. Luocio nodded and asked again, "How long do you plan to reboot this time?" 2,628,768 hours, 44 minutes, 12 seconds was still an accurate number. 300 years, huh? Luocio pondered for a while and nodded. He looked at Araya in Subworld 0311 and smiled. "I plan to open a branch here, but if it involves the power of the mystical realm, will it affect your original progress?" Araya's blue eyes started to flicker. Her pupils were like the opening of a camera, opening and closing. She was different from the humanoid Araya in Subworld 003. This was a mechanical body. You can speed up the reboot process to accommodate the intervention of the mystical realm. Araya stopped the movement of her eyes. "Question, do you want to proceed?" "Let's do it." Luocio nodded. Araya was very obedient. Whether it was 0003 or 0311, they looked almost the same as Loya. Unfortunately, they were not living beings. They were just some kind of program. "I'll walk around on my own. You can go back." "Understood." Serial 03111 jumped up gently. Its figure faded little by little. Finally, it disappeared in the air. There were actually many people walking on the street, but not many of them could be considered as humans. Most of them were actually machines with a certain degree of functionality. Not all of them were humanoid. For example, the ones in charge of cleaning were cylinders about 2 meters tall. There were humanoid shop assistants in the shops. Luocio wandered for a while and walked down a street. He only found a few shops that were managed by living people. The degree of automation in the whole city was quite high. There was nothing similar to the history of Subworld 003 here. There was only one kind of human race. When Miss Maid finished teaching the 2 new Black Soul envoys and came to her master through the border gate, Luocio was in a shop in the city. There were all kinds of glasses on the shelf. Most of them were complicated. Obviously, the function of the glasses was not only for viewing. "Master." When Miss Maid's voice sounded, Luocio smiled and took out a pair of relatively light brown glasses from a shelf. Then, he put it on Miss Maid's face. There was a mirror next to it. Luocio stood behind Yi. He pressed his hands on her shoulders and looked at her in the mirror. "Well, this color doesn't look good." Miss Maid had a satisfied expression on her face. She smiled and said, "What's the function of this pair of glasses?" Luocio reached out and tapped the frame lightly. The glasses emitted a halo that covered Yuye's head. "I don't know the details." Boss Luo said rather casually. "It should be developed from VR technology, but it's much more advanced. Consciousness can be infiltrated, but it doesn't need to be stealthy." "Eden?" Miss Maid felt a little surprised at this time. After putting on the glasses and activating its function, it was completely different from before. Through the holographic image brought by the glasses, it could be seen that in this shop, in addition to the humanoid shop assistant and the club's master and servant, there were many customers, men and women. The people here seem to prefer to live inside, and the glasses are their entry point. Luocio smiled and said, "It seems that in addition to this kind of external wear, you can also directly do permanent eye implantation surgery, but it's more expensive." Miss Maid looked around. Reality and virtual were really intertwined. After a while, after experiencing this novelty, Yi took off the glasses and turned her eyes. "It seems that this place is very suitable for the Master God Project. But the food is not good." Following Luocio's gaze, they saw a food shop across the road. It was just that this shop sold boxes half the size of a palm. "Like jelly, there are all kinds of flavors." Luocio shook his head and said, "Although it's convenient, the taste is a little bad." Miss Maid knew that the master's curiosity had always been strong, and he must have tried it before she came. She smiled and said, "I'll go back and make egg pudding for master." "Okay." Luocio nodded. "Come on, walk with me. Let's see if there's a more suitable place. You always have better taste than me." "Master, please wait a moment." Miss Maid began to scan the shelves as she spoke. After a while, she found a silver glasses box. She put the glasses in her hand and then held it in her hand. It seemed that she didn't want to let go of it. Luocio smiled and glanced in the direction of the counter. The humanoid shop assistant was clearing the account. At this time, the account naturally had an extra income. There was very little cash flow in this world, and more digital currencies were used. After leaving the shop, Luaccio didn't have a fixed direction to go. He just followed his feelings, holding Miss Maid's hand, and began to walk. When it was almost dusk, the haze in the sky dispersed a little. The yellow afterglow gradually turned the street into a darker color. Because there was nothing that Miss Maid liked, she could only hold the silver glasses box in her hand in the end. "It's good here." You stopped in front of Clock Tower. It seemed to be a place where one could find and feel the time. "Then here it is." Luaccio looked up. The hour hand and the minute hand connected into a branch, vertically cutting the huge clock plate. Then the bell began to ring. It was time for the library to close. Today it was Tara's turn to clean up. Of course, she didn't need to deal with locking the door. The gatekeeper did a good job. Tara pushed the cart and put the last batch of books back to the original bookshelves. The moonlight was a little cold. The Witch of Gerfalcon seemed to enjoy the time when there was no one in the library. She hummed a soft tune and tiptoed to return the last book to its original place. Tara stretched herself. Suddenly, some small sparrows fell in front of the window. Tara's eyes lit up. She took some unfinished bread, crushed it, and spread the crumbs on the windowsill. She watched the sparrows pecking at the bread with great interest. The sparrows were not afraid of her. When Tara stretched out her fingers, they would gently peck twice. It seemed to be a very happy thing to tease the birds. Tara didn't feel bored at all. Some noises startled her and the small sparrows in front of the windowsill. Tara looked at the sparrows flapping their wings and flying away. She felt it was a pity and then looked back curiously. The witch from the prairie opened her eyes wide at this time. In the narrow space between the bookshelves, Chun Mingming stood with a book in his hand. "I found it at home. This should be the only one left." Tara smiled at first, then showed a curious look. She looked at it and then slowly walked over. "Didn't you go abroad? So you're really a monster. You feel different." Tara stood on tiptoe and patted Chun Mingming's forehead. "You look more energetic." The Witch of Gerfalcon was the daughter of a god and a woman on the prairie. She looked at him as if she could see through him. "Why did you help me?" Now, he understood why Tala had helped him so many times. Tala smiled faintly and said, "Do you know, the witches of the grassland are supposed to bring happiness to people?" "Oh, but I'm a little stupid. I don't know how to get close to you, so I used this method." She put her hands behind her back, bent down, and then raised her head. Her eyes were shining like stars on the prairie. "This is also a part of cultivation. You won't blame me, right?" Chun Mingming smiled and sighed. "Thank you." Tara touched Chun Mingming's forehead again and said gently, "You are a good boy. Although I don't know what happened to you. Your smile is so beautiful now. Maybe I will be really moved. My time is almost up. Are you not coming back?" "Not necessarily." Chun Mingming didn't intend to make any promises, but if you come back, maybe you can come back and borrow some books. "I'm not necessarily here." Tara smiled and took the book from Chun Mingming's hand. She opened it and looked down. "I'm going to travel during the summer vacation." "Well, is this book good?" When she looked up, there was no one in front of her. Tara chuckled and put the book on the cart. Then, she pushed the cart and cheerfully went to find its original position. Zhao Lu felt that it was time, so he slowly squatted down in front of Zhang Xiaoqin's bed. She was asleep and didn't know Zhao Li's arrival. Zhao Lu put Zhang Xiaoqin's exposed arm under the blanket and carefully pulled the blanket. He sighed and stood up. He said in a low voice, "I'll definitely earn enough achievement points as soon as possible." As if walking through a long and dark tunnel, Zhao Lu bumped into Chun Mingming along the way. The two of them nodded silently and walked towards the light of the only exit. After walking through the tunnel, what appeared before them was a huge British-style clock tower that looked like it was from the 19th century. Looking at the sky track that ran through the entire city, Zhao Lu and Chun Mingming walked into the clock tower with a trace of shock. There was no one to lead them, but something seemed to be guiding them. After walking into the clock tower, they followed the stairs and walked past the museum that was originally in the clock tower. After passing through the restaurant, they finally arrived before an ancient wooden door. Without much hesitation, the two of them pushed open the door and walked in. They saw a silver-white humanoid machine that looked like it came from iRobot. At this moment, it slowly bowed and said, "Good evening, I am Dang. From today onwards, I will serve the two of you and help you complete the Master God project." Chun Mingming was calm, while Zhao Lu was cautious. They didn't say anything and just listened carefully. Late at night, Zhou Yuxing took the documents and looked at them as he returned to his office. Just as he walked in, he saw a cup of tea on the table. He put his finger on the teacup and tested it. It was still warm. A trace of doubt flashed across his eyes. Zhou Yuxing walked out of the door and looked around the office, but he didn't see anyone. Strange. Zhou Yuxing shook his head and didn't pay too much attention to it. Maybe one of his subordinates knew that he hadn't left yet and pretended to be here before leaving. Zhou Yuxing sat down, picked up the teacup, and took a sip. He felt that the concentration of the tea was all right and suited his taste. He nodded his head, pulled himself together, and began to look at the documents that he went out to get. Like a camera, suddenly, everything disappeared. It was Luochio who stood up. Like turning off the TV, this final scene disappeared, and he got up to go home. A person who lost his father felt like the world had come to an end. A person hugged the cold corpse of his son in his arms. The white-headed person sent the black-headed person off and screamed. Where even now, when he returned home, the various things that happened over the past few days slowly dissipated from his heart. Chapter 1242. Half a month ago, on the East Sea, about 300 nautical miles away from the seashore, a white yacht was sailing forward. The moon was bright and the stars were sparse. Inside the yacht, Su Zijuan, who was wearing a black dress, held a glass of deer blood and looked at the dark sea outside the window. Jessica, who was beside her, looked a little reserved. In front of the sofa, Ghost Baby was in his usual Mohican costume, holding a bottle of deer blood, waiting quietly like a waiter. On the deck, an owl landed on Chi-Chi Kamaya's arm. The old tortoise, whose age was unknown, looked into the owl's eyes for a while, then turned around and walked into the room. "Princess, the Xianyuan gate is about to open. Please get ready." Hearing Chi-Chi Kamaya's words, Jessica was a little nervous. She knew that she was about to step into an ancient tribe on the land of God Kelowna. It was almost born with the history of Kelowna. For thousands of years, the dynasties on the land of Kelowna had changed, but this tribe had always existed. Compared to this ancient tribe, the Michael Club she used to belong to was obviously so young. And the girl in black dress in front of her, the owner who brought her immortality, was the princess of this ancient tribe. Hearing this, Su Zijuan put the glass on the table, wiping her lips with the handkerchief that Ghost Baby gave her, saying casually, "The taste of the snow deer in Changbai Mountain is getting worse and worse." Ghost Baby didn't say anything, but just put it away. This was the best thing that could be found outside. Chi-Chi Kamaya smiled. "Last year, 2 white peacocks grew up in Luo River Stream. I've asked someone to get them for the princess." Su Zijuan glanced at him, saying indifferently, "Get one for her later. She hasn't gotten used to drinking human blood, so it's good to drink some rare beast blood. Otherwise, she'll embarrass me if her strength is so weak." Hearing this, Jessica's expression became unnatural. After becoming a zombie, Jessica more or less knew the difference between a zombie and a vampire from Su Zijuan. They both needed to drink blood as the driving force to increase their strength, but they relied on different things. A vampire's heart was like an engine that required fresh blood as fuel to start. Zombies, on the other hand, needed the essence contained in fresh blood. Zombies were different from vampires. When they were weak, they were afraid of sunlight and didn't rely on fresh blood as much as vampires. Even the growth of a zombie was much slower than that of a vampire. However, when Jessica heard that Su Zijuan asked Chi-Chi Kamaya to prepare a portion of peacock blood for her, she felt somewhat relieved. She hadn't eaten anything since she came back from abroad and experienced the Punlai treasure house and the Battle of Mount Tai. Although the zombie did not rely on blood as much, it was still in a state of hunger. It was just that it had not reached its limit yet, so it could still endure. She was even a little afraid that Su Zijuan would starve her until she could no longer suppress her instincts, and then let her drink human blood. Jessica walked out of the cabin with Su Zijuan and came to the deck while she was thinking about a lot of messy things. The cold wind raised waves on the sea. All of a sudden, a kind of turbulence began to spread from the bottom of the ship. As the ship swayed, a huge whirlpool appeared on the sea in front of them. Then, two huge golden pillars with coiling dragons emerged slowly from the whirlpool. Jessica used all her strength to look at them. She saw a warrior wearing golden armor and holding a broadsword standing on each of the two huge pillars. The two warriors' faces were covered by the golden masks, but their eyes were as sharp as a bayonet. Jessica felt that she was close to death with only one glance. "They're the gatekeepers of Xianyuan Gate," Chichikamaya explained to Jessica. "They're the sixth-generation gatekeepers. I heard that you used to belong to a Michael club, right? These two gatekeepers are not worse than the immortal generals of the club." 12 immortal generals. Of course, Jessica knew what the immortal generals represented in the club. They were the strongest forces under the 26th seat. The club had developed for hundreds of years on the European continent and recruited numerous geniuses and powerful people. But there were only 12 immortal generals in this ancient tribe. Only the gatekeepers had the strength of immortal generals. "Greetings, Your Highness." On the golden pillars, the two gatekeepers knelt down on one knee. Su Zijuan just nodded and then glanced at Chichikamaya. Since they were going back to Xianyuan Palace, the royal princess naturally needed to restore her princess's temperament. "Thank you for your hard work," Chichikamaya smiled. "Gatekeepers, please open the Xianyuan Gate for Your Highness." "Yes." The gatekeepers cupped their fists and stood up respectively, drawing out the golden sabers from their waists. In a split second, the two huge pillars started to emit golden light. As the golden light flashed, Jessica lost her sight. When she regained her sight, she saw a blue sky. The yacht had left the original sea area and arrived at a calm lake. "Miss Jessica, it should be your first time to enter the Xianyuan secret land." Chichikamaya stroked his beard and smiled. "This is the Red Maple Lake, the entrance to the secret land." Jessica looked around and found that the lake was green. The lakeside and the surrounding mountain streams were all red maple. It was like a fairyland in the human world. There were rare and exotic beasts on the lake. A group of white cranes flew over her head. At this moment, waves suddenly appeared on the surface of the lake, and a huge figure broke out from the lake. Its body was curled up, and it was actually an incomparably huge monster. It looked like a python and a snake, but it wasn't a snake. It was greenish-black, had right horns for claws, and thin wings on its ribs. It's a dragon named Aohei. It's a branch descendant of the ancient dragon tribe in the East Sea, but its bloodline is very thin now. Chichikamaya's voice sounded timely. Jessica just listened. Although she had learned the culture of China because of Yi Yin, she didn't know these ancient things. The flood dragon, named Aohei, was circling around the yacht. It lowered its huge head and stuck close to Su Zijuan's face, acting like a well-behaved child. Su Zijuan gave a rare smile. She touched Aohei's right horn and said with a smile, "Not bad. You've gotten fatter after 80 years." Aohei's eyes were suddenly filled with fear. Jessica could see that its body was trembling. "Princess, it's late. Let's go back to the palace." Chichikamaya reminded her helplessly. Aohei was smart enough to dive into the water. It swam to the back of the yacht and started to push it to the lakeside. By the lakeside, people could be seen from afar. Jessica saw rows after rows of soldiers in golden and silver armor. Behind them, there were many old people, men, women, and children in ancient Han costumes. Among them, there was even a group of creatures that looked like humans, but were not. They had the characteristics of various beasts on their bodies. Further away, one could see rows of ancient buildings with distinct levels and crisscrossing streets. On top of that mountain, there was a majestic hall that was dazzling in gold and jade. Suddenly, Jessica felt that she had entered a movie theater of ancient palaces. When the yacht finally stopped, all the people on the lakeside knelt down. "Welcome back to the palace, princess. Get up." Su Zijuan stood on the bow and waved her hand with a cold face. It was the first time for Jessica to see Su Zijuan like this. She was used to having a childish face, but now there was a rare majesty on it. After that, Jessica was dumbfounded. As a girl who grew up abroad, she had never seen the complicated customs of the ancient Kelowna except for watching movies occasionally. When she came back to her senses, she was already at a corner of the majestic palace on the mountain. Beside her were two girls in palace attire, serving her. Finally, Su Zijuan thought that she might not be suitable, so she sent Ghost Baby to accompany her. When they met again, Ghost Baby had already dressed up. She wore a long robe and dyed her hair black again. She looked like a gentleman in a suit and leather shoes when she was in Mount Tai. Ghost Baby asked someone to bring a set of palace attire and asked the maid to help Jessica put on. "Miss Jessica, you can stay here for the next 2 days. You're the direct servant of the princess. You have a noble status. If you need anything, just tell them." "Master, won't she come?" Jessica asked subconsciously. Ghost Baby said indifferently, "The princess will meet the chiefs and deal with some things. It won't be peaceful, so you just wait here." Jessica seemed to think of something. A few days ago, there seemed to be a rebellion in the Xinyuan Palace on Mount Tai. In the main hall of the Xinyuan Palace, Su Zijuan was wearing a phoenix crown and a purple dragon robe. She sat on the couch with her hands folded on her legs and her eyes looking straight ahead. Under her seat, the chiefs of the Xinyuan Palace stood in rows. Chichi Kamaya changed into a court attire and stood on the right side of the chiefs. On the left side, there was a man in his 40s with a dignified appearance. He was thin but didn't look frail. Half of his sideburns were white and he looked dignified. At this moment, a man in his 30s with a dignified face was kneeling among the crowd. Chichi Kamaya said loudly, "Gongsun Qian, you connive your son Gongsun Shiyu to participate in the chaos of the Tianxin branch. You even mobilized the 36 Big Dipper generals without permission. You trapped Kelowna in the fire and water for your own selfish reasons. Do you know your crime?" "I know my crime," the man who bowed his head said with grief. Chichi Kamaya glanced at the man on the left. Seeing his calm face, he continued, "Gongsun Qian, I know your crime. From now on, you'll be stripped of your position as the vice chief of Qian Division and the commander of Big Dipper. You'll be punished with 200 lashes and have to reflect on your mistakes for 50 years. I know my crime," the man who bowed his head said bitterly. At this moment, all the chiefs in the hall were silent, as if they had expected this result. Chichi Kamaya looked around and said, "Everyone, please take this as a warning." All the chiefs below nodded in agreement. From the beginning to the end, Su Zijuan didn't say a word. Only now did she reach out her left hand. A palace maid came forward to support her. Another palace maid came forward to lift the hem of the dragon robe and slowly left. After Su Zijuan left, the hall was no longer silent. All the chiefs walked towards Chichi Kamaya. There were two major divisions in Xinyuan Palace, Qian Division and Kuan Division. Qian Division was led by Gongsun clan. There were also Yoxiong, Shaodian, Wei River, and other human tribes of different sizes. As for Kuan Division, it was made up of mountain spirits and sea monsters that had been incorporated over countless years. Chichi Kamaya exchanged greetings with the Kuan Division beasts for a while before slowly walking to the man on the left. He bowed with both hands and said with a smile, "Greetings, Lord Huangquan." This was the head of Qian Division, the one with real power in Xinyuan Palace. Gongsun Qian, who was stripped of his position, was only Gongsun Huangquan's third son. A smile appeared on Gongsun Huangquan's solemn face. "Lord Gui has finally found the princess. Your contributions cannot go unnoticed. I thank Lord Gui on behalf of Qian Division." "Haha, don't mention it." Chichi Kamaya nodded. Gongsun Huangquan said again, "But why hasn't the princess shed her drought demon body and recovered her Xinyuan bloodline?" Chichi Kamaya said indifferently, as her subjects, "How could we dare to guess what the princess wants?" "That's true." Gongsun Huangquan smiled and nodded, stroking his beard. Now that Gongsun Shiyu is dead, the position of imperial son-in-law is empty. Before he finished, Chichi Kamaya suddenly interrupted, "Lord Huangquan, now that Gongsun Shiyu is dead, the princess wants to choose another husband. It is against etiquette. We can talk about this later. Besides, When it comes to the imperial bloodline, the Gongsun clan's bloodline is naturally the thickest. Lord Huangquan, why are you in such a hurry? That's right. Gongsun Huangquan chuckled and said with narrowed eyes, That's what I mean too. Lord Gui, why are you interrupting? Oh, it seems I've been too petty. Chichi Kamaya quickly apologized. Gongsun Huangquan said indifferently, Forgive me for not being able to accompany you in this internal strife. I have to go back and tidy things up. Farewell. Farewell, Lord Huangquan. Chichi Kamaya called out loudly. Chichi Kamaya watched as Gongsun Huangquan slowly left the hall with the other leaders of the Qian clan. Only when Gongsun Huangquan disappeared did he sigh. That old bastard can really endure. After that, Chichi Kamaya summoned the other leaders. Although Gongsun Shiyu is dead, his accomplice, Gongsun Jishui, is missing. Pass down the order to capture Gongsun Jishui and bring him back for execution. In the South China Sea, far away from the East China Sea, a helicopter slowly landed on a small island. When the helicopter landed, a group of men in white uniforms and armed with modern weapons came up to greet it. A man with a broken wrist walked down from the helicopter, followed by the group of white soldiers. The man with a broken wrist quickly passed through the forest and walked into a facility built within the mountain. After walking through a long metal tunnel, he walked into an elevator and went up. Not long after, the man with a broken wrist arrived at a courtyard. The courtyard was covered with glass. The man with a broken wrist walked to the center of the courtyard. Here, a man with long black hair wearing white training clothes was sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed. The man with a broken wrist slowly walked over and called out softly, Shu, you're back. The man with long black hair, Gongsun Shu, slowly opened his eyes. You've worked hard, Shi Shui. The man with a broken wrist, Gongsun Shi Shui, was silent for a moment before saying, There's news from the Xinyuan Palace. The princess has returned to the palace. The first thing she did was to punish Lord Qian. He's going to be locked in the ice pool for 100 years to reflect on his mistakes. Gongsun Shiyu said calmly. Gongsun Qian is obsessed with power. He hasn't made any progress for many years. 100 years of reflection isn't necessarily a bad thing. I hope he can cultivate his mind and make a breakthrough. Gongsun Shi Shui didn't say anything. He only took a deep breath and took out a blood-colored jade. He pushed his palm and sent it to Gongsun Shiyu. The blood jade landed lightly in Gongsun Shiyu's palm. After he held it and felt it for a while, a smile appeared on his face. Initially, I thought that test subject number 19 was just an arrogant fellow, so I didn't have much expectations for him. Who would have thought that he would be able to evolve his bloodline? Not bad. After that, Gongsun Shiyu crushed the jade in his hand. Instantly, a beam of blood-colored light merged into his body. At this moment, a powerful aura emanated from Gongsun Shiyu's body. Gongsun Shi Shui's heart skipped a beat. After a long time, this aura slowly calmed down. I can summon Xinyuan Killing God with 50% of its power. Gongsun Shiyu slowly sighed. I didn't expect the evolution of number 19's bloodline to increase my summoning power by 25%. Not bad. Congratulations. Gongsun Shi Shui smiled. Why don't you fix your broken wrist later? Gongsun Shiyu looked at Shi Shui. Test subject number 20 is almost finished. Since I'm already dead in the eyes of the Xinyuan Palace, then don't use Gongsun Shiyu's identity anymore. Where are you going? Gongsun Shi Shui frowned and asked. I have my own plans. You go and heal first. Gongsun Shiyu said calmly. Okay. Gongsun Shi Shui nodded and turned to leave. Not long after, Gongsun Shiyu stood up and walked into the depths of the courtyard, arriving under a Bodhi tree. Standing under the Bodhi tree, the tree trunk suddenly split open. Then a black screen slowly extended. Gongsun Shiyu pressed a button on the screen. The electronic voice slowly sounded. Chapter 1243. When she returned to her bedroom, Su Zijuan took off the phoenix coronet on her head and threw it on the ground. Then, she took off her yellow robe, revealing only her undergarments. The two palace maids following closely behind her hurriedly tidied up the clothes Su Zijuan took off as she walked. When she arrived in front of the couch, Su Zijuan casually picked up the prepared white peacock blood and drank it slowly. Her bare feet dangled from the couch. After drinking half a cup of white peacock blood, Su Zijuan licked the corner of her mouth and said calmly, "You can leave for now." "Yes, princess." The two palace maids bowed and left. After the two palace maids left, a guard's voice came from outside. Kuan Division Leader Gate Darren has arrived. When Chichi Kamaya came in, he saw Su Zijuan holding her forehead, seemingly resting with her eyes closed. Her long black hair covered half of her pale face. "Princess, how does this white peacock blood taste?" "Enough of this nonsense." Su Zijuan opened her eyes. "After I left, did that old bastard Gongsun Huang Quan make things difficult for you?" "Lord Gongsun is fair and impartial. He serves the public wholeheartedly. Why would he blame this old servant for such a small matter?" Chichi Kamaya lowered his head. "Is it that he won't or that he doesn't care?" Su Zijuan laughed coldly. "Of course not." Chichi Kamaya raised his head and said seriously, "Lord Gongsun is the staunchest supporter of the imperial bloodline. As long as it's an imperial order, Lord Gongsun will have no complaints." Imperial family." Su Zijuan shook her head. "Gongsun Shiyu's rebellion this time has implicated many of the major tribes in the Qin division. Make it difficult for them to investigate internally. I'll leave the investigation to your Kuan division and order Gongsun Huangquan to assist you." "This old servant understands." Chichi Kamaya nodded. "This old servant will go now." "Wait a moment." Su Zijuan suddenly called out. Chichi Kamaya turned around and obeyed. Su Zijuan grinned and suddenly said, "Take my order and go to the secret treasure pavilion to get a pair of mirage dragon pearls. Don't tell anyone about this." Chichi Kamaya was stunned. "What is the use of the mirage dragon pearl, princess? It's boring to ask too many questions." Su Zijuan waved her hand. "You can leave now. Also, from today onwards, get Ghost Child to train that servant of mine and teach her the various etiquettes of the royal family." "Princess, stop it. You just returned to the palace." Chichi Kamaya's eyes twitched. He already knew what Su Zijuan wanted to do with the mirage dragon pearls. Su Zijuan glared at him and snorted. "She needs at least 1.5 months to learn the etiquette of the Xinyuan Palace. Isn't that enough?" "Princess, please reconsider," Su Zijuan said indifferently. "Do you want me to draw the blood of your bastards?" Chichi Kamaya sighed helplessly. "Yes, your majesty." Asterisk, 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 asterisk at the exit of the arrival hall of the airport. Ren Xiling was holding a piece of A4 paper with the words Lung Feng written on it. Obviously, it was written with lipstick. "Boy, speaking of which, how long has it been since you last saw your Uncle Dumbo?" Nanny Rin stared at the exit and nudged Luochio, who was standing next to her with her elbow. Boss Luo's answer was very unique. "I saw him once at the funeral and once in the spring of that year. It's been so long." Ren Xiling nodded and reminded her in the tone of a mother, "Be more obedient later. Don't say things that you can't pry open even after 10,000 years. You can't go wrong by calling him uncle. Although your Uncle Dumbo isn't your father's colleague and isn't as close to our family as your Uncle Ma, his relationship with your father was forged through fighting. It can't be wrong." "Forged through fighting?" Luochio was stunned. His father had many friends, but he was still young back then and couldn't ask for help for everything. As for this Uncle Lung Feng, he didn't have a deep impression of him. Rin Xiling wasn't wrong. His closest friends were his father's colleagues. In the recent 3 or 4 years, Ma Haud was the closest. Later on, his father's brothers and sisters had all developed their own careers, and it was very difficult for them to get together again. Rin Xiling said, "I also heard you're dead." Dad mentioned it accidentally. At that time, "You're dead." Dad wasn't a captain yet. He was just a small police officer. Lung Feng, on the other hand, was just a new recruit. One of them was a soldier while the other was a police officer. One night, your dad was on a case and wanted to catch a drug addict. Then, he bumped into Lung Feng, who was out drinking during the holidays. Then, they got into a fight because of a misunderstanding. And then? It was the first time Luochio heard this story. After that, no discord, no concord. The two of them got into a fight, and your dad broke his arm, while Dumbo broke his leg. Both of them were hospitalized for half a month, and they were even in the same bed. Then, they joked about becoming sworn brothers. What era is this? Hey, they're coming out. In the crowd, a spirited man wearing a leather jacket walked out quickly with his luggage. Lung Feng was tall and straight. His strides were wider and faster than a normal person's. In the blink of an eye, he found Rin Xiling in the crowd and walked over to her. Xiling. Lung Feng smiled and greeted her. Then, he looked at Luochio and reached out to grab his shoulder. Good boy. I haven't seen you in a few years. You've grown taller. This man had a rare forthrightness. Sincere people could easily move people. Uncle Lung. Luochio nodded with a smile. Lung Feng nodded. There are too many people here. It's not convenient to talk. Let's go. At the exit, there were many passengers coming out, and there were people welcoming them. It was quite crowded and not a good place to talk. Rin Xiling left her car in the parking lot. Therefore, she let Luochio bring Lung Feng to the exit while she drove her car up from the garage. Let's go. Lung Feng smiled at Luochio. He did not feel unfamiliar after not seeing him for a few years. However, his eyes seemed to be looking at the place where they came out. Are we still waiting for someone? Luochio suddenly asked. No, it's nothing. Lung Feng shook his head. However, he thought to himself, this little guy seems to be quite sensitive. This way then. Luochio smiled and bent down to take the luggage in his hand naturally. Lung Feng did not feel rude at all. He did not stand on ceremony. He just smiled and left with Luochio. The next moment, they arrived at the exit. An ordinary-looking man looked at them in confusion. He then looked around and asked, What's going on? Where are they? Dumbo. How long are you going to stay this time? Granny Rin drove the car up. After Lung Feng and Luochio got in, they drove out of the airport. Just 4 to 5 days. Lung Feng looked out of the window. I'll walk around and meet some old friends. I'll go back after that. Under Luochio's gaze, Rin Xiling did not dare to be distracted. She could only look straight ahead. That's good. We've booked a place for dinner. Let's go there after we settle down. Old Ma said he'll come on time to welcome you. That's very kind of you. Lung Feng nodded with a smile. He suddenly said, Xiling, let's not go to the hotel first. Send me somewhere. Where? Lung Feng said slowly. I want to pay my respects to Brother Luo first. Rin Xiling was surprised. She nodded silently. The atmosphere in the car suddenly became quiet. Rin Xiling could not stand the silence. She turned on the radio. I'm not going up. You can bring your Uncle Dumbo up. In front of the cemetery, Rin Xiling did not get out of the car. Instead, she locked herself in the car. Lung Feng opened his mouth and looked at Luochio. He saw the latter shake his head lightly. In the end, he did not say anything. After the two of them walked away, Lung Feng sighed. It's been so many years. She still hasn't let it go. Luochio sighed and said softly, She said she can't come more than once a year. If she does, she won't be able to stand it and will cry. I'm sorry. Lung Feng laughed bitterly. If I had known, I would have come secretly another day. Luochio shook his head. Your father is so lucky. Lung Feng patted Luochio's shoulder. Unfortunately, he has a short life. He won't feel lonely. Lung Feng smiled. He was quite satisfied with Luochi's son. After not seeing him for a few years, Luochi no longer had the childishness of a young man. Instead, he seemed to have lost some of the hot-bloodedness of a man. Lung Feng had served the army since he was young. He was surrounded by soldiers who showed off their abilities. Naturally, he preferred young people who were full of vigor and freedom. It was not that he disliked Luochio because of this. He just felt that this kind of bookworm was not his style. Luochio, are you interested in training in the army? Lung Feng suddenly asked before they reached the tombstone. Thank you for your kindness, Uncle Lung. Luochio said with a smile. In half a month, I'll be going abroad. There's a university abroad that wants to recruit me. Lung Feng nodded. He was not too disappointed. He thought carefully and said, This is also a way out. When you return in the future, you could be a useful person. Not bad, not bad. Luochio recalled a summer when he was young. He did not know where his father got the energy to interrupt his birth mother's plan to enroll him in a piano class. Instead, he brought him to a military base to train. At that time, it was all thanks to Uncle Lung Feng. If there's a chance, I'll go to the army and get some guidance from Uncle Lung. Ha ha, you said it yourself. Lung Feng was really a forthright person. I'll make it clear in advance. If you dare to come, I won't give you any preferential treatment. I'll F***CK you the way I F***CK the recruits. I won't hesitate. Luochio smiled. He was thinking about his physical fitness. It shouldn't be a big deal. Aya, so many years have passed in the blink of an eye. Lung Feng sighed. I still remember the first time you came to my camp. You weren't even half my height. Now, you're taller than me. Time really flies. At that time, I felt that you were a little weak. You didn't look like your father at all. Instead, you looked like your mother. When you were young, you were like a girl. I even thought that you were born in the wrong body. Even with the boss's calmness, he still felt a little unnatural. Lung Feng smiled and said, but my opinion changed after a few days. Luochio looked at him in confusion. When he was so young, he naturally did not know what the adults thought. Lung Feng recalled, do you remember one day when you got lost and walked into the forest alone and spent the night there? Luochio nodded. Many childhood memories would gradually fade away, but as long as he wanted to remember them, he could remember them clearly. This was nothing compared to his other abilities. Your father and I were really worried. We thought that when we found you, you must have been scared. But when we found you the next morning, you were full of energy and not scared at all. You spent the night alone in the forest. You're so brave. When you grow up, you'll definitely be a man. When he was young, he could be considered a man. Oh, right. Speaking of this, there's another interesting thing. Lung Feng suddenly said, do you still remember the girl you met that night when you got lost? Luochio nodded. At this moment, the memory gradually became clear. A face curled up in a tree hole, crying softly appeared in front of him. Once the memory became clear, with his current ability, many things could become clear in an instant. So was her. Miss Zhong, what happened to that girl after that? Luochio asked casually. Lung Feng said, according to what you said, our people naturally found her later. The girl's identity was a bit special. Her family background was a bit developed, so I won't say more. But at that time, it was because of you that we found her. You might not know, but after the girl's family found out about this, they secretly helped your father. Otherwise, how could your father, a newbie with no connections and no one above him, become the captain of the criminal police team one so quickly? Your father can be considered to have borrowed your luck, but not many people know about this. I only found out about it a few years later when I talked to a friend of that family. Luochio always felt that his father's career was quite smooth. Maybe it was because of luck, but it also seemed that there was someone secretly supporting him. However, that was before he became the owner of the shop. It was something that happened when he was young. However, after he became the owner of the shop, fate sent the Zhong family to him. Of course, this wasn't the script in the hands of 003, Araya. That script couldn't control him now. This should be a higher level of fate. Vaguely, Luochio felt a trace of power that existed in countless subworlds, but was not used by the whole Araya system. This power couldn't be higher than the source behind the altar he came into contact with, but it was so obscure. Could it be the power of the Eternal Empire's royal family? Seeing that Luochio didn't speak, Lung Feng smiled and said, how about it? Thinking that this little girl's family isn't simple. So you want to play a scene of a prince and a princess meeting? But if you have the heart, I might be able to help. Uncle Lung, you're joking. Luochio came back to his senses. I have a girlfriend. Lung Feng shrugged and didn't say anything. When they arrived at the tombstone, he put down the flowers and bowed deeply, saying softly, Brother Luo, I'm here to see you. Since the third miss of the Zhong family came back from abroad, she moved into another house in Fragrant Hill and rarely saw guests. Most of the Four Seasons group under her name was handed over to her subordinates to manage. She hadn't interfered with the internal affairs of the Zhong family for some time. Fragrant Hill and Hongya were famous, but this was obviously not the time. In the room with the curtains drawn, Ms. Zhong played the piano alone, her thoughts drifting into memories. Chapter 1244. She couldn't hide her tiredness. Fortunately, it was getting late, and her spirits were gradually lifted. When her finger finally stopped on the black key, The sound of the last note lingered in the room for a few seconds before gradually dissipating. The afterglow of the setting sun shone through the thick curtains, leaving only a faint gray light. Jean Luoyuel lowered her head, and from a half-awake state, she became completely awake. Click! The light turned on. The door opened, and Elizabeth, wearing a white dress, walked in barefoot with a basket in her hands. "You're awake." Elizabeth smiled. This was a woman that most men would flock to, if not for the fact that they were vampires. She was like snow. Due to long-term malnutrition, Elizabeth looked like an albino patient. The hair on her body was almost completely white. This characteristic had been fixed. Even after she broke her vows and drank fresh human blood, she still didn't get better. But in Jean Liu's eyes, the white-haired and white-browed Elizabeth was so different, like a work of art. As a woman, she couldn't help but marvel at her extreme beauty. Unlike the Middle Ages, or even earlier times, white-haired and white-browed people weren't regarded as monsters, and some people with secondary interests loved them even more. If Elizabeth's ears were sharper, she would probably be regarded as a real fairy on Earth. The last time she went back to the Zhong family's mansion, she only met the young master of the Zhong family once, but her brother still couldn't forget him. If it was before she went to South America, Jean Luoyue might have acquiesced to this matter because of the family's stability and the competition between the two sons and one daughter of the Zhong family, so that she could exchange more benefit from her brother. But now that she had been turned into a vampire by the embrace, she was no longer interested in the competition between the aristocratic families. Now she was only thinking about how to define the identity between a human and a vampire. Maybe 100 years or 100 years later, she would laugh off her troubles. But she had only been a vampire for a few months, so how could she let go of everything at once? She heard that the holder of the black card could find a mysterious place where he could buy anything he wanted. She wondered if he could buy back the identity of a human. Over the past few months, Elizabeth had spared no effort in teaching Jean Luoyue many things about the vampire clan. This was basically what every vampire elder had to do for their descendants. Unfortunately, Jean Liu's elder had died in the underground palace of the god of Gambler's Manor, so the responsibility of teaching naturally fell on Elizabeth. Thinking about becoming a human again, Jean Luoyue couldn't help but feel discouraged, because Elizabeth had already said that it was possible for a human to become a vampire, but it was impossible for a vampire to become a human again. It was like a bird hatching from an egg. Once the bird hatched, it was impossible for it to turn back into an egg. At that moment, Elizabeth was taking out several bottles of different blood types from her basket. These were all rare blood types that Jean Luoyue had secretly gathered from all over the country using his own wealth and influence. Not long after, Elizabeth came in front of Jean Luoyue with a crystal cup. Jean Luoyue, who was used to the smell of blood, resisted the instinctive display of vampire characteristics while slowly drinking the blood. For vampires, Jean Luoyue was like a newborn baby who needed to be taken care of. Jean Luoyue always felt like she was being breastfed, while Elizabeth would urge her to drink enough blood for 3 meals a day. The taste seems a little different today. After wiping the blood on her lips with a handkerchief, Jean Luoyue felt that there seemed to be some subtle changes in her body. Elizabeth smiled and said, "Because from today onwards, you can drink mixed blood appropriately. This is a modulation method passed down among vampire clans, using 2 or more rare blood types to make it more similar to the effects of pure blood, and it can also reduce the toxicity of the rare blood types. The rare blood types that you ask people to find are of high purity, so before you complete the first transformation, you shouldn't need to use the first purification potion. Before the first transformation, the purification potion can maximize your body's potential. After the first transformation, you can at least become a noble. Duke, Marquis, Earl, Viscount, Baron. Then there was vampire nobility. Vampires who had just received the embrace could only be considered newborns. They could only become true vampires after the first transformation. However, most of them were just commoners among vampires. After the second transformation, they could become vampire nobles. If they could become nobility after the first transformation, They could be called the elites of vampire clans. Zhong Luoyue showed a sincere smile as she thought about the knowledge she had learned these days. It seemed that the emotional investment in Elizabeth was not in vain. But when you undergo the first transformation, it's best not to be here, Elizabeth suddenly said. Zhong Luoyue nodded. When she was still an ordinary person, she didn't feel anything, but recently, she felt more and more restless. The entire capital was everywhere, as if there was an air pressuring her, making her feel uncomfortable all over, as if she had fallen into a swamp. This feeling was especially clear in the Zhong family's mansion, and it was only slightly better after she moved to Fragrant Hill Resort. According to what Elizabeth had said, there seemed to be a super large magic circle under the capital that contained an abnormally terrifying power. This power was even more powerful than the ancient magic circle that she had once participated in during the sacred blood ceremony that was held every 10 years by the 13 vampire clans. Even the power contained in the ancient magic circle was incomparable to that of the sacred blood ceremony that was held every 10 years. As for the gigantic magic circle hidden under the capital, it seemed to have the functions of scouting, suppressing evil, and so on. Therefore, even though they were already hiding in Fragrant Hill Resort, they still couldn't help but relax a little on normal days and try to restrain the vampire power in their bodies. I'm almost done with the arrangements. Zhong Luoyue held Elizabeth's hand and let her sit beside her. She whispered to her like a close friend, "We'll leave here in a few days. First, we'll go to the Aegean Sea, then directly to the UK." Elizabeth blinked. During this time, she gradually learned about Zhong Luoyue's family and knew that the Zhong family was one of the top families in the world. "But is it okay for you to leave like this?" Zhong Luoyue smiled and said, "I graduated from a school in the UK. This time, the reason is that I want to go back to my alma mater to have a look and make some investments there. Besides, there's another event. This time, it's my family's turn to host it. If I hold the event in the UK, no one can say anything." "What event?" Elizabeth asked curiously. Zhong Luoyue did not hide it. "The World Gambling Competition. Last time, the representative of my company won the championship. Therefore, according to the rules, this time my company will be the host." Although Elizabeth often reduced her consumption by sleeping, every time she woke up, she would learn about the outside world, especially about the god of gamblers, Tushini. After all, this was the key figure in the private production of True Blood by the Seven Families. "No wonder you want to go to Tushini." Elizabeth nodded. Before he retired, he was recognized as the god of gamblers. "It seems that you originally planned to win this gambling competition again." Zhong Luoyue said, "Tushini has retired and will not participate in any kind of competition. However, things like vows can be changed at any time. Plus, the place where Tushini retired happens to be the territory of one of my rivals. Even if I don't invite Tushini, she will invite him." Speaking of this, Zhong Luoyue shook her head. If she knew that this plan of inviting the god of gamblers would make her inhuman in the end, Zhong Luoyue would definitely not go. Although becoming a vampire would have far more physical strength than humans, she was not unaware of her own situation. What Elizabeth had told him about the size of the 13 clans was enough to make Zhong Luoyue feel that she was in danger. Even though she had become powerful in the eyes of humans, there were many vampires who were more powerful than her in the vampire clans. Yet, such a powerful vampire still had to hide. This showed how fearful this powerful non-human clan was of humans. She did not want to be the young lady of the top family in the human world. Instead, she wanted to become a newborn vampire among the vampires and become a servant that a large number of adult vampires in the 13 clans could command. Why bother? Of course, she was unwilling. Now that it had become a foregone conclusion, she could only plan for her own future. As for Elizabeth, she could only be her guide in the beginning. After the initial stage, she had to consider whether it was worth continuing to invest in her. From the moment Elizabeth finished talking about her life, Zhong Luoyue knew that Elizabeth was probably only at the level of a child in the vampire world. Moreover, she was also outside the core of the 13 clans. At the same time, She was also very otaku. From the moment she was born until now, she spent most of her time in deep sleep. She had almost no friends in the vampire world. It was not an exaggeration to say that she fought alone. Your rival, is it the woman beside Brother Luochio? Zhong Luoyue was multitasking. She nodded while thinking about the future. Actually, speaking of rivals, it can't be defined like this. It's just that there are more or less some conflicts in the business field. She and I are about the same age and graduated from the same alma mater. Many times, people will compare us. Rather than saying that it's fate, it's more appropriate to say that it's an ill-fated relationship. Elizabeth obviously did not care about this. She just lowered her head and said rather shyly, "I see. Then I don't know if Brother Luochio will come at that time." Her voice was very soft, like a whisper, but Zhong Luoyue could hear it. Since she heard it, she could not help but have a stomachache. In front of that powerful force, she always felt that she was a real baby. It's best not to. After the worship, Ren Xiling drove Lung Feng to the hotel where he was staying. That night, Sir Ma escaped from the painful hell of investigation and came to this small gathering with the pot-bellied Mrs. Ma. There were not many people, and they were all acquaintances. After Ma Howd and Lung Feng drank for a while, Ma Howd began to complain, causing Mrs. Ma to roll her eyes. After the meal, Ma Howd was already drunk. Mrs. Ma was pregnant and inconvenient, so Ren Xiling could only send the two of them home first. Then, she let Luochio accompany Lung Feng back to the hotel. She did not know if it was because the people who came from the army had a terrifying alcohol tolerance. After returning to the hotel, Lung Feng acted as if nothing had happened. He directly pulled Luochio to the hotel's gym and began to grind the treadmill vigorously. Lung Feng often led troops through cross-country physical training. He adjusted the speed of the treadmill to the advanced level and did not force it at all. Luochio calculated the time and difficulty. He did not increase the speed. When he was about to run, he naturally stopped and ran completely with his ability, which was defined as 5. 5. Not long after, he was sweating twice as much. "Kid, your stamina is not bad. You ran with me for so long. Only a recruit who trained for half a year can do this. I have to train more in the future." Luochio smiled slightly. Lung Feng was actually quite satisfied. He felt that although Luochio was a little bookish, he did not look like an idiot. He worked out well. "You go back first." Lung Feng wiped his sweat. "Just come over tomorrow. I have to meet an old friend later. It's not convenient for you to meet him." "Okay." Luochio nodded and did not ask who it was. Then, he brought a glass of water for Lung Feng, said goodbye, and left the gym. After Luochio left, Lung Feng continued to run on the treadmill. Not long after, a man in his early 30s came onto the treadmill. He was wearing a suit, but he took off his suit and only wore a white shirt. He rolled up his sleeves and started running. About an hour later, Lung Feng stopped and said unhappily, "I ran for half an hour first. If you run for another half an hour, I'll count it as your win." The man on the treadmill turned off the treadmill and looked at Lung Feng with annoyance. "I've never seen someone as shameless as you." Lung Feng laughed out loud. The two of them went to a corner of the gym and sat down. There are not many people in a hotel gym like this. There were very few people around, so it was quiet. It was a good place for a conversation. "How long will you be back this time?" "For 5 days," Lung Feng said casually. "All right. Did anyone look for you these few days?" The man thought for a while and shook his head. "Are you talking about the woman with the surname Rin that you asked me to look after last time?" Lung Feng said seriously. "That's my brother's widow. I only have one sister-in-law. I have a secret mission in a few days. I don't know how long I'll be gone. Anyway, you have nothing to do here." "What do you mean I have nothing to do?" The man laughed bitterly. "My brother went missing and the old man at home is angry. I can't live in peace." Chapter 1245. Wang Yuechuan was a very famous person in the provincial police station. He was young and handsome, and he solved cases like a god, like a celebrity. Lung Feng frowned as he recalled Wang Yuechuan's information. "What's going on?" The man's name was Wang Yuegang. He was young, but he was already a regimental staff officer. Like Lung Feng, he was part of the army. Lung Feng met Wang Yuegang during a joint military exercise. They got along well, so he knew some things about Wang Yuegang's family. Lung Feng had never met Wang Yuechuan before. He only knew that he was Wang Yuegang's younger brother. However, he was not Wang Yuegang's biological son. He was adopted by Wang Yuegang's father because he was the descendant of an old friend. Wang Yuegang's face was grave. He ran away to avoid punishment. I still don't know what happened. Wang Yuegang gave Lung Feng a brief summary of the information he had gathered. After he came out of the morgue, a foreigner died. He escaped from arrest and even kidnapped his colleagues. Lung Feng sucked in a cold breath when he heard that. He subconsciously asked, "Are you sure this is your younger brother and not an imposter?" Wang Yuegang smiled bitterly. "I think so too." Lung Feng asked, "What did the police say?" Lung Feng knew that this was not Wang Yuegang's responsibility. The army and the police were two different systems. If Wang Yuegang dared to interfere, he would be overstepping his authority. He could only ask about it, but he would definitely look into it. "So far, we can't find him." Wang Yuegang frowned. After he escaped that night, he seemed to have disappeared into thin air. However, I heard that he escaped toward Xinjiang. We speculated that he might have used this opportunity to escape to a few Southeast Asian countries. It's not easy to analyze. Lung Feng said, "Your brother has a bright future. He wouldn't destroy himself. Have you thought about why? Maybe he has some difficulties?" Wang Yuegang rubbed his forehead. "I have the same thought. Usually, if there's nothing serious, there won't be betrayals. At first, I thought that there might be a reason behind it. Maybe there's a special mission. But from my father's reaction, I'm afraid that's not the case." Lung Feng did not know how to comfort the other party. No matter what, he was still a member of the Beijing police force, and there were many barriers between the regions. Furthermore, this was a police matter, so the most he could do was listen. Furthermore, when he returned this time, he would be participating in that secret project, so there was nothing he could do. But he couldn't bear to see his friend in such a difficult situation, so he frowned and said, "How about this? I'll introduce you to someone. Maybe you can find out something." "Oh, tell me quickly." Wang Yuegang's eyes lit up. Lung Feng smiled and said, "It's the person you're taking care of, my sister-in-law." Wang Yuegang immediately frowned. However, he knew that Lung Feng was a man of his word, so he patiently waited for Lung Feng to explain. Lung Feng said, "Ren Xiling is a bit special. Even though she's just a reporter, she's very well connected in the underworld. She has some connections with an old gang in Xinjiang." Wang Yuegang couldn't help but frown even deeper. Lung Feng said, "Not many people know about this, so don't spread it. But don't worry, she's not really a member of the gang. She's just related to the leader of the gang. Ren Xiling was an orphan since she was young. But for some reason, the leader of the gang in Xinjiang sponsored a few children to complete their education in China. My sister-in-law is one of them." "There's such a strange thing?" Wang Yuegang was stunned. But when he thought about how vast China was and how anything could happen, he felt a little relieved. "Yeah, I was shocked too." Lung Feng recalled, "My brother's ex-wife died when he was young, and I only met her after she remarried. I attended the wedding too. According to my sister-in-law, she did send an invitation to Xinjiang, but she didn't expect this great benefactor to come. But she's a great benefactor after all, so she had to be courteous. I didn't expect this great benefactor to really come. She drank too much at the banquet, and in a moment of happiness, she took her as her goddaughter. Later on, I found out that this great benefactor's ancestral home is here. But she traveled to Xinjiang in her 70s and made a name for herself." Wang Yuegang couldn't help but smile bitterly. "No wonder you said she's doing well here." Lung Feng said, "Not really, but she'll still give some face to the person in Xinjiang, so most people can't harass her. She never talks about this, but sometimes it's quite easy to ask someone in the gang to look for her. If your brother really wants to escape from Xinjiang, ask the local tyrant. Maybe there'll be some news. As the saying goes, if you're not a ferocious dragon, you won't cross the river." Wang Yuegang knew this. He stared at Lung Feng for a while, then nodded. "Okay, introduce me to her next time. I'll remember this favor." Lung Feng smiled slowly. The plan he was going to participate in was quite mysterious. Even he didn't know how many dangers awaited him, so he had to make some preparations. If Run Xiling really needed Wang Yuegang's help when she was in trouble in the future, Wang Yuegang might help her for the sake of his friendship with her. He might also observe the situation, but obviously he wouldn't be too concerned about it. However, if he owed her a favor, it would be another situation. After all, a debt of gratitude was the hardest to repay. And this was the only thing Lung Feng could do for now. Then I'll ask her out tomorrow to talk about this matter. Wang Yuegang nodded. After Wang Yuegang left, Lung Feng went back to his room, but before he opened the door, Lung Feng frowned. His action of opening the door slowed down a lot. After he opened the door, he didn't enter the room immediately. Instead, he took a few glances before he walked in step by step. At this moment, a strong wind came at him. Lung Feng didn't panic. He squatted down and dodged an elbow strike. He turned around and immediately counterattacked. After the two of them exchanged a few blows in the room, Lung Feng was punched in the chest. As for the attacker, he was kicked in the chest. His face was a little pale. Lung Feng finally saw the attacker's face clearly. He had an ordinary face. It was hard to notice him at first glance. "Who are you? Why are you following me?" Lung Feng's eyes suddenly became sharp. This was the spirit that was trained on the battlefield. "Since the airport in the capital, you've been following me, right? Major Lung, you're really good at martial arts." This ordinary-looking man suddenly put down his hand and smiled. "I'm here for a matter. I just want to cooperate with you on something." "Oh." Lung Feng glanced at him and said indifferently, "Aren't you going to introduce yourself first?" Lung Feng said as he walked towards the small bar in the room. He poured himself half a glass of whiskey and then found an ice cube. He put 2 pieces of ice in the glass. "You can call me Viper." Facing the ordinary-looking man, Viper put his hands behind his back. "I'm here on behalf of my boss." Viper. His mind quickly searched for information about this name. Suddenly, Lung Feng's heart skipped a beat. "I heard that 10 years ago, there was an expert of Xingyi Fist in the middle of Shu who escaped after killing someone. 3 years ago, Viper appeared in the capital and joined the Zhao family in the capital. You're that Viper?" Viper smiled faintly. "Major Lung is really smart." Lung Feng said casually, "There are too many rich and noble families in the capital. It's not like I don't know how they died. However, I don't have much contact with the Zhao family in the capital. I don't know anyone from the Zhao family. I really don't understand why your boss needs to look for a small soldier like me." Viper waved his hand and said, "Major Lung, don't be so humble. Being able to become a major at your age means that you have a bright future ahead of you. In a few years, you might be able to rise to the top." Lung Feng sneered. "You haven't told me why you're looking for me." Viper was silent for a moment before he suddenly said, "I heard that Major Lung is going to participate in a secret plan. And this plan is to select the elites from the entire country's military." A murderous glint flashed across Lung Feng's eyes. Viper acted as though he did not see it and continued, "My boss hopes that Major Lung can help. If you can tell him the details of the plan after you participate in it, we'll definitely reward you handsomely." Lung Feng snorted. "Since you know about this plan, you should know that this is a secret document from the chief, right? The Zhao family in the capital. Isn't this a little too much?" Viper looked at Lung Feng and said, "Major Lung, you just have to answer me. Are you going to cooperate or not?" Lung Feng said, "You can leave. I can pretend that I don't know about this. I don't care who you find, but don't mess with me." Lung Feng had a lot of things to consider. Since the people from the Zhao family in Beijing were able to find him, they must have some understanding of the contents of the document. Therefore, it was not strange for them to see him on the selection list. However, this also proved that the Zhao family had indeed extended their influence into the military, and they had extended their influence deep enough. Now that he had been found, Lung Feng believed that the Zhao family had started to interact with many of the people on the list. Lung Feng had no idea how many of them would succumb to the temptation of the Zhao family, but he couldn't control every single one of them. This was a serious matter. He needed to contact the leaders in the military immediately to report it. A small military officer like him had no right to interfere in the fight between the rich and powerful. Lung Feng had started to lead the military in recent years. He had cultivated his character and studied in the military university. Otherwise, if he was as hot-blooded as he was in the past, he might not have ended up like this tonight. Major Lung, as the saying goes, a wise man submits to circumstances. Viper's gaze suddenly turned cold. The Zhao family will not mistreat you. Of course, I don't want any trouble. Since I've already told you about this, I don't want you to refuse. Lung Feng raised his eyebrows and sneered. What? What if I don't agree? Viper said calmly. Major Lung went back home to visit your family. Unfortunately, you met with a mishap on the way. It's really a pity. Lung Feng's gaze turned serious. He exuded the aura of a cheetah and shouted coldly, How dare you murder a major? Viper did not reply. Attacking was his best response. He sneered and flipped his palm. A dagger appeared out of nowhere like magic. He held it in a reverse grip and attacked directly. Lung Feng sucked in a breath of cold air. The martial arts that he had learned all these years were not for nothing. He immediately threw a punch. In the room, Viper dodged left and right. His movements were nimble and his attacks were vicious. Lung Feng countered each attack, but he could not block the tricky angles of Viper's dagger. He became more and more worried. Viper was famous for his Xingyi fist. He had not used his full strength yet, but Lung Feng felt that he could not handle it. As expected of a soldier who has been through life and death situations, Viper retreated. Major Lung, if you had learned martial art from a young age, you would have surpassed me by now. However, the little Xingyi fist of the army is still not enough. Lung Feng snorted and sucked in a deep breath. There was a palm-sized wound on his arm that was dripping with blood. Viper threw the dagger away and stood with one foot in front and one back. He punched with his front hand and elbowed with his back. Lung Feng sucked in a breath of air and focused all his energy. Viper took 2 quick steps forward and threw a punch. Lung Feng instinctively blocked it with his elbow. Unexpectedly, he felt a sharp pain as if the bones in his arm were about to break. The excruciating pain made him lose focus for a moment. After Viper threw a punch, his second punch went straight for Lung Feng's chest. With Viper's strength, if this punch landed, Lung Feng's sternum would probably break. He did not have time to dodge. Viper's attack speed was not something a normal person could achieve. Lung Feng learned martial arts in the army and vaguely heard that there was a martial art passed down from ancient times. After mastering it, one could coordinate all the strength in one's body and even unleash the so-called force. Could this Viper really be a descendant of ancient martial arts? He did not have time to think about it. This tricky punch had already landed on Lung Feng's chest. Crack! Lung Feng could hear the sound of bones breaking clearly. However, it was not his sternum, but Viper's wrist. At this moment, Viper's punch was like hitting a steel plate. Not only was it unable to penetrate, it was completely broken. Iron mantle. Viper's expression changed drastically. His punch had landed on Lung Feng's chest. Not only did he not succeed, he was also crippled. How could he not be frightened by the pain and fear? Lung Feng shuddered. He did not know what force was, so he could only twist his waist and throw a punch with all his strength, landing directly on Viper's chest. This punch was so powerful that Viper, who was in a daze due to the shock and the recoil just now, did not have time to circulate his chi to defend himself. This punch landed squarely on Viper's chest. Viper was sent flying by this punch. He retreated continuously before finally stabilizing himself. However, he licked his throat and resisted the urge to spit out the congested blood in his body. At this moment, his combat strength had decreased to less than 30%. However, Lung Feng was trained in military combat. How could he miss this opportunity? He attacked again. Viper knew that tonight's mission had failed. Lung Feng's momentum was high, while his own was low. His spirit was damaged, so he could only choose to retreat. Viper lifted the tablecloth beside him and rammed into Lung Feng. Then, he dashed out the door. Lung Feng gritted his teeth and chased after him. However, he did not know where Viper had gone in the end. He could not help but feel frustrated. However, he lowered his head and looked at his chest, puzzled. Chapter 1246. It was late into the night when Lung Feng finally finished treating his wound. The wound on his arm did not reach his bone, which was a blessing. As for the arm that blocked Viper's punch, it was completely red and swollen, but it was not obvious because he wore a long shirt. It was painful in the beginning, but after getting used to it, it did not affect his daily movements. As a veteran, he could still endure the pain. However, Lung Feng kept thinking about what happened tonight. Viper's escape was a complete accident. With the strength he displayed, he was confident that he could kill Lung Feng. Viper had made a name for himself more than 10 years ago. He was one of the people who had truly learned the ancient martial arts. He also had an extremely terrifying dagger assassination skill. He had come prepared and recharged his energy. As for Lung Feng, he had been drinking all night and grinding on the treadmill in the gym for more than an hour. He had used up a lot of energy. Therefore, when Viper attacked, it could be said that he was riding on the dragon's face. How could he lose? However, for some reason, his last punch broke Viper's wrist, greatly reducing Viper's strength. That was why Lung Feng had the chance to turn the tables. However, it did not mean that Viper would not appear again. Since he dared to say that the Zhao family was behind this, he must have been prepared to kill Lung Feng if Lung Feng did not agree. Lung Feng did not know the relationship between the higher-ups and the Zhao family. It was not difficult to find out why he returned to his hometown. Anyone with some position could find out. The difficult part was finding out that Lung Feng was on the list for the secret mission. There were too many things to consider, especially this kind of power struggle. Lung Feng boasted that he never took advantage of anyone. However, he could not resist the power of the nobles behind the scenes. The game between the officials and the nobles was much more dangerous than a normal fight. In the end, Lung Feng did not choose to report what happened tonight. He was not sure how many people in the army were on his side. He also did not know how many people in the higher-ups had been infiltrated. If he was alone, he would definitely not let it go. However, he had a family a few years ago. After having a child, his anger was restrained. After I joined the secret mission, the organization will arrange for my family to live in a special protected area. Maybe I can do something after that. What I need to do now is to guard against Viper's next attack. However, Viper's hands were quite heavy tonight. It was obvious that he would not make another move for the next 2 to 3 days. The next time he would make a move would probably be after he returned to the capital, before he participated in that secret plan. Lung Feng then thought of his wife and child who were living in Beijing. He made a phone call in the middle of the night and asked his wife and child to find a reason to stay at their old classmate's house for a few days. His wife's old classmate's father was a veteran in the army, so the Zhao family wouldn't dare to do anything to him. After that, Lung Feng sent a message to Run Xiling, telling her that they were going to meet the next day. Finally, he lay back on his bed, but he didn't fall asleep. While Lung Feng was thinking about how to deal with this situation, Luochio had returned home. Nanny Rin sent Ma Haod and his wife home. She had just returned and was taking a bath. Furthermore, she was hollering with her terrible singing voice. Luochio poured himself a cup of cold water and slowly drank it. At this time, someone knocked on the door. Nan Xiaonan. Luochio didn't let Nan Xiaonan into the room. The two of them went to the living room. Nan Xiaonan obediently took out a USB drive with both hands, then solemnly placed it in front of Luochio. I've already written it. I didn't want to trouble Mr. Luo for too long. Nan Xiaonan's expression was calm, but her cheeks looked a little thin. She looked like she was malnourished, so naturally, her complexion was even worse. Thank you for your hard work. Luochio smiled slightly and casually snapped his fingers. Thank you. Nan Xiaonan's face lit up slightly. She suddenly felt that her spirit was much better, and her physical strength was completely recovered. She no longer looked like a human jerk and looked a lot better. But that was it. Her strength unit didn't improve at all. The recovery of the strength unit still depended on her own cultivation in the future. Nan Xiaonan had special means of digestion and conversion of heat. Luochio's snap only saved her a few days of trouble. Mr. Luo, if there's nothing else, I'll go back to my room. Nan Xiaonan was very sensible. I'll tell Miss Ren tomorrow morning and move back. Luochio nodded and didn't mean to keep the guest. I'll look at this information first. If there's something I don't understand, can I ask you for advice? I don't dare to ask. Nan Xiaonan quickly waved her hand and said, I'll tell you everything I know. If Luochio really asked, Nan Xiaonan would definitely answer very carefully. There were some small thoughts here. She knew that Luochio was a person who could casually rub the subworld's rules. If Luochio was really interested in this star creation technique and was even willing to officially add it to this subworld, Nan Xiaonan could even directly skip the time to analyze the world's rules. This was probably able to save decades, or even more time. She was naturally very willing. Only when the star creation technique was completely recognized by the world's will and obtained an identity that cooperated with the world's rules, she could completely release the power of the star creation technique. After that, Nan Xiaonan decisively returned to the room and didn't deliberately say anything. She was very well behaved. Luochio liked this way of getting along. After picking up the USB flash drive on the table and taking a look, he didn't rush to look at it immediately. Instead, he reached out and grabbed a sheepskin scroll out of thin air. Some information about the Zhao family in the capital was written on it. Luochio looked at it while walking back to his room. When he passed by the bathroom door, he knocked on the door. Nanny Run, who was screaming and singing inside, immediately shut up. Then Luochio entered the room and began to carefully read the Zhao family's information scroll. The Zhao family was a wealthy family of the same level as the Zhong family in the capital. Together with the other two, they were privately known as the four great families of the capital. They were mainly involved in the fields of medicine, biology, and new energy. In the 1920s and 1930s, the Zhao family prospered in the Putian area of Minnan. Later, when the flames of war spread, the Zhao family's head raised his arm and called for many doctors in the Putian area to join the Red Tide. After the establishment of the new country, they gradually expanded. Not to mention the four great families of the capital, many of the wealthy families in some places developed after the war. Luochio wasn't very interested in the history of these wealthy families. He was only curious about the bloodline of the Zhao family. The ancestor of the Zhao family was actually the bloodline of the Song emperor of the Song dynasty. However, unlike the Song family, who changed their surname and buried their name, the Zhao family had always considered themselves as the orthodox. In this way, the ancestor of the Zhao family and the ancestor of the Song family were the descendants of the same family. Well, in the morning, Ren Xiling brushed her teeth messily in the bathroom. Her hair was like a chicken's feathers. Nan Xiaonan, who had already packed up early, walked out with her luggage at this time. Sister Ren, thank you for taking me in these 2 days. Ren Xiling was stunned. After spitting out a mouthful of water to rinse her mouth, she quickly asked, Are you going to leave? Aren't you living well? In fact, Ramama suddenly had an idea these 2 days. It was actually not bad to let Nan Xiaonan continue to live here. Without it, her precious son would officially go abroad to study in half a month. She was the only one left at home for a long time. It was cold and lonely, so it was better to find someone to accompany her. It's not a good idea to trouble you all the time. Nan Xiaonan smiled slightly. Renmama said, But what if you are harassed? Nan Xiaonan had already thought of a countermeasure. I applied for a public dormitory, and it has been approved. The neighbors are all policemen, so that person shouldn't dare to come again. Ren Xiling nodded and said readily, Okay, if you can't find someone to help you with something, you could discuss it with me at any time. Wait for me for a while. It's inconvenient for you to carry your luggage. I will send you to work later. The police station is not far from where I work. Okay. Nan Xiaonan did not refuse this time. She came to the living room and waited for Ren Xiling to get dressed and go out, but she did not see Luochio. She only saw breakfast on the table and a note. The breakfast was bought and packed in a box, and there was also a share for her. In addition, there was a gift box next to it. There was also a note on it, which was also for Nan Xiaonan. Lady Nan, thank you for your technique. This is a small token of my appreciation. I hope you like it. When Nan Xiaonan opened the box, she found 6 exquisite jars inside. Nan Xiaonan realized what was inside. These things, in her distant memories, were all things that could be seen everywhere, even to the point of being worthless. But now, to her, they were like priceless treasures. These were the special condiments and jams of her childhood hometown. Money cannot buy them, nor could time. These were things that had been destroyed and could not be replaced. Nan Xiaonan took a deep breath and slowly calmed herself down. Then, she carefully put the gifts into the suitcase. She thought that it would take a long time to eat these. Early in the morning, Lung Feng brought Wang Yuegang to the lobby of the hotel and then went to the place where he and Ren Xiling had agreed to meet. Old Ren was different now. He was the CEO of the magazine, so he waved his hand and asked someone to clean up the guest room. He was very proud of himself in front of Dumbo. Strange things happen every year, but there are a lot of them this year. This was Lung Feng's evaluation. He knew Ren Xiling's personality very well. In his words, she was a good soldier, a soldier who could charge in a battle, but definitely not someone who could be a leader. Nanny Ren was no doubt shocked. Even the coffee that she asked someone to bring to Lung Feng was cold. "Tell me, why did you bring this Mr. Wang here to find me?" Nanny Ren held a cup of longan and red date tea and slowly drank it. At the same time, she looked at Wang Yuegang, who was beside Lung Feng. She remembered this name. Before she left Mount Tai, Lung Feng gave her a number with this man's name written on it. Although she did not plan to look for Wang Yuegang, Nanny Ren was a gossipy person. When she came back, she investigated Wang Yuegang's identity. A 30-year-old combat staff officer at the regimental level, this was not a small military rank. This time, she was looking for someone through her connections. Wang Yuegang could not speak directly, so she asked Lung Feng to do it. Lung Feng smiled and said, "It's like this. I want you to look for someone in Xiangjiang. This person might still be hiding in Xiangjiang or Oman. He might have sneaked into Southeast Asia through the waterway. I know you know some people." Ren Xiling almost choked. She looked at Lung Feng strangely and said, "Dumbo, you won't even let go of my connections." But Ren Xiling had already understood Lung Feng's real intention. Ever since her husband passed away a few years ago, his brothers and sisters really spared no effort to make connections with her, as if they were afraid that she would be wronged. Nanny Ren's heart was naturally warm. "Miss Ren, if you can help me with this, I will remember this favor." Wang Yuegang said at this time. Ren Xiling rubbed her forehead and said, "To tell you the truth, I definitely like to earn favors, but I can't earn all kinds of favors. To be honest, Lung Feng said that I might not be able to use my connections. After all, I have only met him a few times. During the new year, I would call him 1 or 2 times, but we have only met a few times. But after all, that person was her benefactor who helped her finish her studies. That person in Xiangjiang might not care much about it, and the money he gave her was just a drop in the ocean. He might just treat it as doing a good deed, but Ren Xiling would not forget. It was not true to say that they did not have much contact, but they really did not meet much. The last time they met was 2 years ago, when that benefactor went to his hometown to worship his ancestors. Ren Xiling just met him in a hurry. "This is my good brother. Do me a favor." Lung Feng said sincerely, "I will try, but it's best not to have too much hope." Ren Xiling gritted her teeth and said, "That benefactor of mine has not been in charge for a long time. He has washed his hands of the golden plate." Naturally, Lung Feng and Wang Yuegang knew what washing their hands of the golden plate meant to the leader of a time-honored society in Xiangjiang. However, it was not difficult for the elders of the society to ask their subordinates to look for someone. The key was this connection. "Mr. Wang, can you give me the information of the person you are looking for first?" Ren Xiling continued. Wang Yuegang hesitated for a moment and nodded. He had already prepared the information when he came here, but the person they were looking for was Wang Yuechuan, who was already a wanted criminal. He could not just hand it over like that. With this woman's intelligence, she would be able to guess a lot of things just by looking at the name. Xiling will not speak carelessly. "Don't worry," Lung Feng said calmly. "Then I will leave it to you, Miss Ren." Wang Yuegang handed over the information. Ren Xiling casually flipped open the document and saw a photo attached to it. Looking at Wang Yuechuan's appearance in the photo, Ren Xiling frowned subconsciously. She felt that she had seen this person somewhere before. Rin Xiling was very careless in her daily life, but she had a good memory. This was the basic quality of a reporter. After thinking carefully, Rin Xiling was sure that she had seen this person in the photo before. It should be caused by the suicide of a cram school student last year. The person was sent by the provincial government to investigate. Rin Xiling went to the police station to inquire about it and saw him in a hurry. I remember this person. He seems to be a wanted criminal. Rin Xiling frowned and looked at Wang Yuegang. What's your relationship with him? He is my younger brother. Wang Yuegang told her the truth. Okay. Rin Xiling did not hesitate too much. She only trusted Lung Feng. I will give you an answer by tonight at the latest. After the two left, Rin Xiling went back to her office and knocked her head with a ballpoint pen. After a while, she picked up the phone resolutely. It was not an authentic Cantonese accent. Hello, Master Xiling. You're related to me, Xiling. You're related to me. I'm really related to you. Thank you for your concern. Master Qi, where are you? Master Xiling, are you busy? Did I disturb you? Of course not. I am drinking my morning tea with my uncles. You don't come to me for no reason. Why did you ask for my help? Chapter 1247. Hong Kong, Wanggu, a private lounge. Several young men in black suits were guarding an old man. They didn't get too close because they knew that the old man didn't like people around him to hear anything when he was talking on the phone. There were 3 floors in the lounge, and this was the highest floor. At this moment, a man with a 3-inch scar on his face frowned and walked up the stairs. Seeing that the old man was still talking on the phone, he looked at the young man. The youths respectfully called out at the same time, Brother Jian. The middle-aged man. Brother Jian nodded. 7th uncle, did you finish the call? The young men shook their heads. Brother Jian frowned, but still patiently waited by the stairs. After a long while, the old man called 7th uncle slowly turned around. Okay, you're sending? Persimmon Limited lot? Seeing that 7th uncle finally hung up the phone, Brother Jian quickened his pace and walked to the front of 7th uncle. 7th uncle directly said, Jian, help me scrape a person. I'll wait for you for the information. Brother Jian was stunned and thought for a while, 7th uncle, what does it have to do with me? 7th uncle shook his head. Oh, it has to do with my mainland? Ji, Di, a person. Chi knew. Brother Jian opened his mouth. He had been following 7th uncle for a while and knew that he had a child, but he didn't know that he had a goddaughter outside, let alone in the country. 7th uncle smiled casually. It's almost 20 years ago. Lu Bing 9. Pai Hui Lu Lui. Pai Luo Yi. Bai. Li Sheng Li Yuan. 2S Chiao. Li changed to stop. Cao Dao. Panji sword. Di Chong Dao Gugu. Yuan Yong Di Fu Gun Mi. Xie Lui Di. Shi. Cupping one's hands in front of Li Sheng. Unforgivable. Gui Jun. Worldly affairs. You're right. Believe it's good. Oh, believe it's good too. Me will take it as doing good deeds and accumulating good karma. Li Sheng. Yi Si Yao. Mian to Mian by Junling Mi Shuo. Dizzy. Rongzhan by Gao. O Fugumi type. Yao. Haunting Ruby Ji. Hunched. Meibo. Shao Kai. O Lamifer Siege and Brother Jian sneered and said, the 6 Nations Grand Ministers, if they don't show up and have a dozen or so messengers watch them closely, it will be like a Dutch brat beheading someone. This season's Dutch boy is the most popular. 7th uncle said with a smile that was not a smile. He's not even eating. How would he know how to show filial piety to me? Yong Miao, Ke. How could a man be too far away from his wife? Brother Jian said, Dutchmen and by Tu Kuan are vying for the position of leader. 7 countries outside? Hu Yao? Mei Fu Sun Xian Ningyu? Shameful? Jin Dan? Zifongda? Jin Xian? Bad boy dipped shirt? You clearly think you're transparent, so you want me. Brother Jian made a throat-slitting gesture. What good is it for me to insults with Danzai? 7th uncle shook his head. How many years? Xiong? Black flames? And H constriction? Cave Island shirt armor? Xing Ding. Fen Hong? Judo Luo? What? Offering a sacrifice to the spring festival? What? Xing Xing Air, she shrugged. She? What? Creek and curl? By June, but the system, how do I know about you? Lie? Return? Shira Sini? Balon, cataract disease, forcing Pang Pang Juicy to flatter her. Ao, clothes? How much is Yi Wei Zi Fong Ju worth? Retreating in exhaustion? Paging? Yi Ji Ming and Li Huan? Diseased? What? Sheriff Fubo? Qi? Zi Fong? Clothes? Plague of lousy? Ash? Gong 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 gong. The giant serpent's humiliation treatment? K. I know what to do. Brother Jian nodded his head. Then he looked at the staircase and suddenly sat down. He moved closer to seventh uncle and whispered, Sway, Barbara, Lu Jun, why don't you tell me about it? Seventh uncle's eyes narrowed. Brother Jian said in a low voice, He Shengzi already has a candidate in mind. This time, we're planning to use King Shao. You old fox. Seventh uncle snorted. Do you think that just because you don't have any left distance, I won't be able to weigh you? Brother Jian said helplessly, but if we don't have He Shengzi's support, it'll be hard for us to get the right to participate in the competition. Seventh uncle said indifferently, You don't have to worry. I've already set up a backup plan. Next month, you bring King Shao to Malaysia. I'll go with Guobian. A certain Mimi will represent Guobian in the competition this time? No. Dishi? L? Not Ao, Ishao, Dishi? Dishi? Hua. Ben Bianshi? Wan Watame? Bien Yong? Hua. Okay. Brother Jian nodded. Seventh uncle squinted his eyes and said, Let's eat porridge and eat. Let's watch this time. In the office, Zhong Luochen was reading the report of the recent events in the family. Ever since he saw Transcendence, his focus was no longer on the whirlpool of power in the family, but he was unable to extricate himself from this whirlpool for the time being. Especially since the old master miraculously got better last year and gave Zhong Luochen a huge sum of money, there were more voices in the family, and they were all people close to his elder brother, Zhong Luoyin. But no matter how many voices there were in the family, old Master Zhong would not do anything in these few years. But the reason was only known by Zhong Luochen, old Master Zhong, and grandfather Luo. But third sister's recent actions are a little strange. Zhong Luochen carefully read the information in his hands. Since the end of the new year, Zhong Liue's Four Seasons group had a lot of changes in personnel, and some of them were even the higher-ups of the group. These people were transferred to other departments, and then some new people were supported. Even Zhong Luochen knew that most of these new people were his elder brother Zhong Liyun's men, and there were even some who were in Zhong Luochen's own team. This made Zhong Luochen feel strange. The business and relationships in the family were complicated and intertwined. Although Zhong Luoyue had always been the leader of the Four Seasons group, she and her elder brother Zhong Luoyin also held shares in the group. Similarly, Zhong Luoyue and Zhong Luoyin also held shares in the business under Zhong Luochen's name. What puzzled Zhong Luochen was that Zhong Luoyue's actions seemed to be cutting off her own arm. She did not strengthen her own control, but instead used her elder brother and her own team. What was this operation? Medical company. The report included a project that Zhong Luoyue was about to invest in England. Zhong Luochen really did not understand why his third sister was suddenly interested in the medical field. Zhong Luoyue's series of abnormal actions made Zhong Luochen, who was far away from the capital, feel vaguely uneasy. Since he stepped into the world of transcendence, Zhong Luochen had long lost interest in the fight for the family's fame and fortune, or in other words, defeating his elder brother and his third sister, and finally becoming the new helmsman of the Zhong family, did not arouse his interest at all. Zhong Luochen knew that this must be related to the deal he had made, but he had to admit that this kind of fight among the rich and powerful families was far inferior to the power that could control life and death. Especially when the research lab made some achievements and found a child with superpowers, Zhong Luochen felt that he had found his direction. His heart, which could not withstand the waves of things, suddenly began to beat. He only kept the sense of achievement. But in front of the identity, status, and wealth of the second young master of the Zhong family, Zhong Luochen suddenly found that keeping the sense of achievement seemed to be a mistake. Anything could be easily done, and he even found it difficult to find any achievement that could satisfy him. While he was pondering, the office door was knocked. Cheng Yin walked in quickly, with an unnatural expression. Zhong Luochen casually closed the file in his hand, remaining calm and collected. Cheng Yun came forward, looking like he wanted to say something, but stopped on second thought. He sighed and said, "Second young master, the gift you asked me to send was returned by Miss Mo. She also said, what did she say?" Zhong Luochen's face was still expressionless. Cheng Yun glanced at him. His second young master had always been very well-mannered, and he had never seen Zhong Luochen flustered and exasperated. "She said that you have finished the course." Cheng Yun paused, glancing at his boss's expression, and then continued, "She doesn't want to teach you anymore, so don't go there again." "Got it." Zhong Luochen nodded. Cheng Yun said with some dissatisfaction, "Second young master, this Miss Mo is too unappreciative. Think about it. There's so many women in the capital who are willing to die for you, but she didn't even look at you. So," Zhong Luochen glanced at Cheng Yun with a faint smile. "What are you going to do?" "I don't intend to do anything." Cheng Yun was startled, knowing that his second young master never liked to use tricks to capture women. So he quickly said, "I just feel sorry for you." Zhong Luochen said indifferently, "Since the gift has been returned, then return it. Go find the landlord of Miss Mo's classroom and see if you can buy the house. Next month, find a reason to reduce the rent by 30%. Cheng Yun opened his mouth, but finally nodded. As a golden henchman, he didn't need to question his boss's decision, as long as he carried it out seriously. "Go downstairs and tell Master 24 that I'll go downstairs later." "Okay, I'll go now." After Cheng Yun pushed the door open, Zhong Luochen moved his chair back, opened the drawer, and took out a box. Inside the box was a sapphire necklace. "Mr. Zhong, you are a good person, but I don't like you." Not long ago, Zhong Luochen had confessed his love, but received a very cold reply. The second young master of the Zhong family didn't suffer a big blow because he understood one thing. He treated his love as an asset, using it to buy 5 years of his grandfather's life. It didn't mean that from now on, he wouldn't have feelings such as love or liking, but he couldn't get love or liking in return. He could love someone, but he could never get the other party to love him back. He couldn't get love. Zhong Luochen sighed. Because he had sold a lot of things, even this kind of pain was hidden in the area where only the sense of achievement was left. He shook his head, put the box back into the drawer, tidied up his clothes, took the elevator, and went downstairs. Soon, he met with 24. Zhong Luochen no longer doubted 24's ability. Just the mystical crow on 24's shoulder was enough to make Zhong Luochen's subordinates, who were known as martial arts grandmasters, suffer a lot. In the entire superpower research lab, Zhong Luochen was the only one who wasn't afraid or nervous in front of 24. Surprisingly, 24, who had strength, wasn't difficult to get along with. He didn't even have a temper. His only shortcoming might be laziness. Moreover, it was contagious laziness. Every time Zhong Luochen met 24, he felt as if he was going to rot. "The smell on your body has become lighter today." Just as he entered, Zhong Luochen heard 24 say something with unknown meaning. Zhong Luochen furrowed his brows. The 24 Club would say some strange things without any care and would never give much explanation. His gaze swept across the crow beside 24 before he sat down. "Sir, I have found the blood of 66 18-year-old virgins that you asked me to find. I don't know when would be appropriate to send it over." "In a few days." 24 yawned. "Recently, I have been attacking the rules of this world, so my mind isn't enough world rules." Zhong Luochen keenly caught some mysterious things. However, he suppressed the curiosity in his heart and just sat there quietly, accompanying 24 in a daze. 24 just sat there with his back bowed. His gaze was unfocused, and he looked like an empty shell. Time passed little by little. About an hour later, 24 suddenly shook his head and muttered, "It's really difficult." "Is it really so difficult to get an official identity?" "Idiot 24? Idiot 24. 24 raised his hand and grabbed the crow. Then he threw it against the wall. The crow was squashed into a lump of mud and slowly slid down the wall. Zhong Luochen had seen this scene several times. Every time, he felt it was very magical. 24 shook his head. After yawning, He looked at Zhong Luochun and said, "Boss, I ate your food for a few days and you helped me find something. Tell me, how many people do you want me to kill?" Zhong Luochun smiled and said, "Does her only know how to kill people?" 24 said weakly, "I can make people unlucky." Zhong Luochun suddenly said, "What if I want Sir to teach me?" 24 raised his head. After a while, he said, "You won't be able to learn it. My curse technique is a soul talent. That's why I can barely use it. Your world doesn't have this." "Our world?" Zhong Luochun frowned and pondered for a moment. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. "Sir, you came from another world?" 0179, what do you mean? Zhong Luochun frowned again. 24 shook his head disinterestedly. "You don't have anything worth telling you." "When will it be worth it?" 24 said with a strange smile. "I used to be a state teacher at the very least." "Are you a king?" Zhong Luochun lowered his head. It was unknown what he was thinking. However, 24 suddenly laughed again. "Although you can't learn it now, it doesn't mean you can't learn it in the future. However, you will need to take some risks." Zhong Luochun listened seriously. 24 narrowed his eyes and said, "I can modify your soul. However, if the modification fails, you will die immediately. Boss, do you dare?" Chapter 1248. Whether it was the ceiling or the four walls, they were all painted black in the room. 24 was once again in a daze. Zhong Luochun did not speak. He even closed his eyes. This was the skill of meditating. He learned it from a Chinese scholar in his early years. However, at that time, it was not to obtain extraordinary power, but to cultivate his mind. Zhong Luochun had always felt that his family background only gave him a relatively high starting point. If he was unable to digest all the advantages brought by this starting point, a child of a wealthy family, like him, would easily fall from the high platform. Once he fell, he would be smashed to pieces. He still couldn't achieve the state of meditating for an entire day, but he was still able to calm his chaotic thoughts, and because he had already stripped too many emotions from his heart, he was able to do it even better than before. Finally, Zhong Luochun opened his eyes. 24 failed again and again. He turned around. Or maybe he felt Zhong Luochun's current state. Do people really have souls? Zhong Luochun's voice was filled with curiosity. What is a soul? A part of the body? Or is it simply the activity of the brain's neurons? 24 pondered for a moment. He was quite surprised by Zhong Luochun's question. He slowly said, "There are many theories about the soul. Different people have different perceptions. Even I have not completely understood the mystery of the soul. Completely knowing all the secrets of the soul is already at the level of the Creator." "Mr. 24, you don't know?" Zhong Luochun frowned. 24 said indifferently, "I am just saying that everyone has different perceptions. Some people think that the soul is a thought. Some people think that the soul is a mark. Some even think that the soul is a part of the will of the world. I am more inclined to this view." Zhong Luochun said, "Then tell me about the view that Mr. is inclined to." 24 thought for a while and said, "I have been to a world that has already become a ruin. They walked a path called science. In this world, they created a new will of the world." Zhong Luochun listened quietly. He did not intend to interrupt. He just memorized every word. They made a machine. In an instant, everyone's thoughts were gathered together to form a huge consciousness. In the instant that consciousness was born, it almost possessed the ability of a creator, not at all inferior to world wills. And the two wills even began to engage in the most primitive of slaughter, ultimately destroying the entire civilization. In the end, the will of the world defeated the collective consciousness and swallowed it. 24 was silent for a long time. The will of the world that has devoured the collective consciousness is unprecedentedly powerful, and its exclusivity is unprecedentedly strong. For explorers like us, it is an absolute forbidden zone. Explorers were forbidden areas. Zhong Luochun still remembered this. Even though the will of the world has become unprecedentedly powerful, I have a feeling that this is its original state. 24 muttered, "I have been spying on this ruined world through the cracks until a new civilization began to appear in this world. Humans began to appear, and the will of the world began to weaken. As the humans continued to reproduce, the will of the world finally returned to the level before it fought with the collective consciousness. Zhong Luochen grasped the key point. Mr. 24, are you saying that the will of the world split itself, cultivated a civilization, and finally swallowed it back? 24 yawned and said, I didn't say that. In the end, this is just a guess that hasn't been proven yet. After all, I have only encountered this situation once, and there is no way to use it as a reference. Zhong Luochen pondered and said, according to what you said, the soul is equivalent to human consciousness, or just a part of it. 24 smiled and said, but if this is the point of view, it is equivalent to saying that whether it is extraordinary power or a scientific power, the source comes from the will of the world. Do you think it is contradictory? It already exists before it has developed, and no matter how it develops, it will only reach the level that it should have. Zhong Luochen's brows furrowed deeper, and he seemed to be talking to himself. It feels like a predetermined script, and then it is rehearsed again and again. Is it to verify something or to observe something? 24 suddenly looked at Zhong Luochen deeply for a while, and then lowered his eyelids slightly, as if he was extremely sleepy, but his heart was far from being so calm. He was very clear about Zhong Luochen's state. He was just a normal person, and a normal person with a missing soul. But such a normal person with a missing soul was actually able to deduce a problem that he had been pondering over for a long time from his words. Of course, there must be something that he discovered as inspiration, but to be able to understand the contradiction in an extremely short period of time and go straight to the core of the problem was already a great achievement for a mortal. Suddenly, Zhong Luochen asked, Sir, is the so-called soul modification technology based on this point of view? 24's drooping eyelids opened slightly. Why do you say so? Zhong Luochen seemed to be in a state of answering his own question. Assuming that human beings have already received part of the power from the so-called will of the world from the beginning, then theoretically, everyone has the possibility of using this power. You said that your spell is the talent of your soul, and others can't learn it. But you also said that I can obtain this power through soul modification. Since it is a talent, it is naturally unique, but it can be obtained through soul modification, which means that everyone has the so-called talent. Some are dominant, some are recessive, and the talents can be different, but they can be adjusted through the means of soul modification. The adjustment becomes dominant, and the adjustment behavior is similar. But the premise of all this is that the core of everyone's soul is at least similar or common. Similar, common, and can be reversed to show that they come from the same source. He always felt that his old foundation would be easily taken away by this new boss. Are the people in this subworld so smart? So you think that the risk of soul modification is actually very small, and that I am just being perfunctory, right? 24 smiled faintly. Zhong Luochen shook his head. This is just my guess, and these guesses came from the information you revealed. I am not conceited enough to think that I am the one who is always right, but I hope that I can test it. Oh, Zhong Luochen looked at 24, and an idea came to his mind. He said indifferently, since Sir can modify the soul, then why don't you test it? I can find a test subject for you. 24 showed an interesting smile. Wait until enough test subjects come out, and after the success rate is guaranteed, then you plan to do it yourself. Boss, I found that you are actually a born cold-blooded person. Zhong Luochen said slowly, I will prepare the candidates. Then, I will not disturb Sir's rest. Zhong Luochen left very decisively. When the door of the room closed and the room fell into darkness, 24's voice slowly sounded. This soul is so good, who is so wicked to cut it. After coming out from Ren Xiling's magazine office, Lung Feng and Wang Yuegang exchanged a few words before parting ways. The main purpose of Lung Feng's return this time was to meet his old friends and old leaders. Therefore, Lung Feng went to visit a few more families. At around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Lung Feng called Luochio. He called him last night during dinner. Are you interested in accompanying me to climb the mountain? After coming out from the last old leader's house, Lung Feng called Luochio. Luochio did not have a deep impression of this Uncle Lung Feng, but he knew that some people did not care about how long they had met each other. His father did have a lot of friends, but for the old Luochio, there were only a few who were really close to him. Of course, if Luochio could give someone a good impression, others could also give it to him. This was probably the so-called exchange of contacts. Luoxia Mountain, a scenic spot in the city where the locals had already vomited. Lung Feng walked along the path with great interest as he talked about these things. Nowadays, very few young people are willing to climb the mountain. Lung Feng smiled and said, "Life is too rich. For young people, climbing the mountain may not be as fun as playing games." Luochio took out a bottle of water from his backpack and handed it over. Lung Feng moistened his throat. The two of them then stopped halfway up the mountain and sat down where the wind was blowing. He pointed at a large gray area in front of them and said excitedly, "I used to train there. Later, the base was removed and I was sent to another place. Yes, this is the place. However, I heard that this place will be removed next year. I heard that a new airport will be built." Lung Feng pointed at the city at the foot of the mountain, giving off a feeling of pointing at the mountains and rivers and mulberry fields. As he spoke, Lung Feng gradually stopped talking and silently looked at the city at the foot of the mountain. After a while, Lung Feng sighed and looked at Luochio. He suddenly said with amusement, "You child, it's strange. Whenever I look at you, I have the urge to say something. If I say that you're not there, you're there, but if I say that you're there, it's like I'm talking to the air. You're really different from your father." Luochio didn't say anything, probably because of his body constitution. Lung Feng shook his head again. "I still prefer young people to be more energetic. At your age, you shouldn't be like this. Child, don't blame me for being nosy. I've seen too many young people. Every year, there are hundreds of new people coming to the camp. Some are younger than you, some are older than you. Some are arrogant, some are hot-tempered, some are timid, and some are quiet. I won't say that all living things are the same, but it's common to see all kinds of people. Is there something on your mind? Is it related to Xiling?" Luochio was stunned. After meeting Lung Feng this time, he was indeed in a rather lost state. He didn't plan to treat Lung Feng like a guest, but at the same time, he couldn't treat him like Ma Haod and Yi Yan. Lung Feng was in the same position that Luochio had met for the first time. They were close, but there was still something missing. But Lung Feng's sudden question interrupted Luochio's train of thought. "Why do you say that?" Luochio asked curiously. Lung Feng was a straightforward person, but at this moment he was hesitating. But hesitation wasn't his personality, so he sighed and said directly, "How should I say this? A few years ago, you were still a child, and you needed to be taken care of the most, so I couldn't say much. But now, you're an adult, and you have your own thoughts. So, what do you think of Xiling? You don't need her protection anymore, and she's still so young. The relationship between you two, I think you should have realized it already, right?" Suddenly, Luochio knew why he couldn't pinpoint Lung Feng's location. There was a moment of silence. Luochio looked at Lung Feng and smiled. It was his boss's voice. "Mr. Lung, you used to like her, right?" Lung Feng's gaze was a little chaotic. He was used to death, and he could suppress thousands of recruits with his aura, but at this moment, he didn't dare to look at the young man in front of him. He was a little angry because of Luochio's sudden tone. Of course, he wouldn't really be angry. Lung Feng smiled bitterly and shook his head. "Kid, if you don't add the word used to, I'm afraid I'll beat you up." Luochio became even quieter. Lung Feng patted Luochio's shoulder and looked down the mountain. "I have a wife and a child, and we have a good relationship. I don't think as much as you do. It's just that as an old friend, I really don't want to see her go on like this. Do you remember what you said to me when we went to the cemetery yesterday?" Luochio nodded. She still hasn't gotten over him. Lung Feng sighed. She's a good woman. She either doesn't fall in love with him, or she stays with him forever. Luochio remained silent. Lung Feng said, "Are you willing to see her secretly cry a few times every year? For the past year, I haven't been able to find what I want to do." Luochio didn't look at Lung Feng. Instead, he looked down the mountain. "I feel like I've been searching for a way to not let my emotions be taken away. but I still can't find the real reason to do this. In the process of searching, maybe I've been doing this subconsciously. Lung Feng frowned. He didn't plan to argue with Luochio today. He just wanted to confirm something. He knew that Ma Haoud and the others had a good relationship with Luochio's family, so it wasn't convenient to talk about some things in person. They needed someone who wasn't close to the family, but who also cared about the family, to expose this matter in person. Lung Feng was probably the one who had to do it. He couldn't figure out why Luochio was saying this, so he asked subconsciously, "What do you want to do?" "I want to find a world where both possibilities exist at the same time and they don't contradict each other." Time paused at this moment. It was a real pause. The earth fell into a state of stagnation. Everything, the sea, the land, the wind, the sports cars, the trains, the countless routes, the people who were eating or chatting, even the maid who was wiping the cups in the clubhouse. These were all displayed clearly in Luochio's mind. Maybe it was just a second. Maybe it was a minute. Maybe it was a long time. Another power that was different from the altar suddenly sprouted in Luochio's body like a seed. The mountain breeze suddenly blew, and Lung Feng shivered. He felt like he had spaced out for a long time. He subconsciously glanced at Luochio beside him. He saw that the latter was holding his phone and taking pictures of the city below the mountain. There were some things he wanted to say, and that was about Ren Xiling's future. But when it reached his mouth, he couldn't say it. Perhaps he should wait a few more years. That was what he thought. "Let's go back." Lung Feng stood up. "I booked a flight for tonight. I'll be leaving soon." Chapter 1249. Summer? It was a street of snacks in Wanwan. The hawkers were shouting loudly, and the crowd was pouring in. The smell of various fried food mixed together, and the air seemed to become greasy. At a stall of seafood porridge, it was steaming hot. The rising steam gradually faded and then dispersed. At a window of an old building where the stall was located, a palm suddenly pressed on the glass. The palm seemed to be twitching and struggling, and then grasped the glass tightly, and finally scraped the glass and slid down bit by bit. The bustling sound of the snack street completely covered the sound in this small house. In the living room of the house, Gong Fanqing was watching something called TV out of boredom. Not long after, a man pushed open the door and came out of the bedroom. Seeing this, Gong Fanqing hurriedly stretched her extremely hot body, took some tissues and gave them to the man. That man took the tissues and wiped his lips, Song Kuang-yin. Gong Fanqing glanced into the bedroom and saw a horribly shriveled corpse lying by the window. She frowned slightly and gently slapped the shriveled corpse with her palm. The shriveled corpse was instantly pulverized, leaving only a pile of gray powder. Song Kuang-yin stood near the balcony with his hands behind his back, and a large amount of qi and blood around him like a dense fog. Not long after, these qi and blood flowed into his body. He turned around, and his face looked a little younger. "Congratulations, Your Honor," Gong Fanqing said softly. Song Kuang-yin said indifferently, "Thousands of years have passed. Most of my descendants have impure bloodlines, and some are even useless. These days, I found a total of 9 descendants with thin bloodlines, and they only provided me with less than 2 years of life. What's there to be happy about?" Gong Fanqing said rather helplessly, "Your Honor, that Qin Chiyu has been closely following us. After we left Mount Tai, she has been chasing us relentlessly. It's really a bit difficult to find your descendants in a big way." Song Kuang-yin also knew this situation. Whether it was him or Gong Fanqing, they had fought with Qin Chiyu several times along the way. Not counting the time on Mount Tai, Qin Chiyu's strength was obviously getting stronger and stronger. The most recent fight was 3 days ago, and Gong Fanqing had even suffered small loss. "I didn't expect this foxy girl to be so talented in the Tao of the sword." Gong Fanqing was rather jealous. "The first time I fought her, I could easily suppress her. I never thought that after she obtained Tai Bai's Green Lotus Sword song, her Green Lotus Sword classic would actually improve by leaps and bounds in such a short period of time. I was able to let her escape with ease every time." Song Kuang-yin snorted coldly and said, "I'm afraid he's using us to test his sword." Gong Fanqing said helplessly, "Huanjin's sex state of mind technique is extremely terrifying. They don't walk on the path of reincarnation one life after another and forcefully stay in a mortal world to grow. Now that the spiritual chi of heaven and earth had returned, this fox charm must have received many benefits. This was the golden period for her to increase her strength. The next time they met, she would be even more powerful. If I don't get rid of this woman, I'm afraid that she will ruin his honor's future plans. Why doesn't his honor directly take away that Song Howren's bloodline? With this child's talent, he will definitely be able to help his honor recover. When that time comes, his honor naturally won't need to fear that Qin Shiyu. Song Kuang-yin looked at Gong Fanqing expressionlessly. She is only looking for you to get information about Tai Bai from you. What does it have to do with me? Gong Fanqing lowered her head. She knew very well that the imperial family was heartless, especially this man who could devour his descendants without hesitation for the sake of longevity. He was even more heartless. That's Song Howren. I need him to fight for the position of the dragon. Song Kuang-yin said coldly. As long as he hasn't become powerful, I won't touch him. You better listen carefully. Yes. Gong Fanqing responded sweetly. Song Kuang-yin said again, from now on, you will separate from me and lead that woman away. I'm going to the capital city of the current dynasty. To the capital city? Gong Fanqing frowned. Song Kuang-yin said indifferently, these days I've heard from the descendants of Zhao family that there's a Zhao family in the capital city that claims to be the legitimate descendants of Zhao family. I plan to go there and have a look. After you lead that Qin Shiyu away or kill her, come to the capital city to find me. Just after he finished speaking, Song Kuang-yin and Gong Fanqing's faces slightly froze because they both felt that extremely sharp sword intent vibrating in the air at the same time. This sword intent was really too familiar. Gong Fanqing's face darkened, and she nodded towards Song Kuang-yin. At this moment, she had no time to sigh at Song Kuang-yin's ruthlessness of using her as bait. Her life soul was in the hands of Song Kuang-yin, so if she didn't want to die, she could only obey. Gong Fanqing said directly, Your Honor, be careful on the way. After saying this, Gong Fanqing directly went out of the door, and then went to the roof of the old building and laughed towards somewhere in the night sky. Vixen, if you have the ability, find a deserted place with me and have a good time. Gong Fanqing instantly rushed towards the entrance, and the sword intent vibrating in the air also chased after her without hesitation. Song Kuang-yin took a look at the snack street downstairs and muttered to himself, Zhao family in the capital city. I hope they won't let me down. You're going back now? Nanny Rin came back earlier than usual today. Because she was a boss now, her degree of freedom was much higher than in the past. It's time to board the plane. Nanny Rin tilted her head and then shrugged. He's really an idiot. He's always so stupid. Forget it. Just leave. After saying this, Nanny Rin took out an envelope from her handbag. Boy, take this. This is for you. What's this? Luochio didn't reach out to take it. Seeing Luochio's disdainful look, Nanny Rin suddenly became angry, rolled her eyes, and directly slapped the envelope on Luochio's chest and said with a glare, It's a supplementary card for a credit card. It's not as convenient to spend money abroad as here. There's no processing fee for exchanging foreign currency. Luochio was slightly startled. Nanny Rin entered into the earnest persuasion mode, put her hand on Luochio's shoulder, and said, Let me tell you, you can't go there without money. Although you said there's a scholarship, you need money to eat, right? You need money to buy things, right? You need money to go to the hotel, right? You can't use Ye's money, right? You'll be struck by lightning if you use a woman's money to get a room in the hotel. But you can use it, but don't use it too much. You also need to pay attention to your body. But I don't mind if you bring a white fatty back to me next year, haha. Go to sleep. Luochio looked at Nanny Rin expressionlessly and turned back to the room without saying anything. Do you dare to be moved? Rin Xiling was suddenly flustered and exasperated. Before opening the door, Luochio sighed. If you feel bored after I go out, you can ask Lizzie to come and live with you. Anyway, there's an empty room. She felt warm in her heart, and her smile became very bright. In front of the desk, Luochio put the envelope with the credit card in the drawer and then locked it. Then she turned on the desk lamp took out a book, A Brief History of Time, from the bookcase, and read it carefully. Of course, the grains of her former hometown couldn't be found, but similar flour products could be found. The taste of white toast was very similar to a certain grain in Nan Xiaonan's impression. She began to carefully pour some jam from the bottle and spit on the toast. She didn't dare to spread too much, only half a spoonful, and it was a small wooden spoon. Nan Xiaonan didn't want to waste it. She licked the jam off the bottle cap, and then quickly screwed the bottle cap. Life needed a sense of ritual. So did eating. It took Nan Xiaonan 15 minutes to finish the small piece of white toast under the etiquette of knife and fork. Of course, she didn't go to the staff dormitory, but returned to her original apartment. As for what Luochio said, she didn't worry too much about it. Because she had gained the qualification and waited for the acknowledgement of a world, she could use most of her spells and techniques without having to constantly communicate with the current subworld. Now, there were only two things she needed to do: the accumulation of power units and the continued expansion of her own star creation spells and arcane mysteries at the level of the world's rules. Because she had obtained the qualification, the two power models had a framework in the rules of this world, which was equivalent to a company that had been officially registered, and the next problem was how to fill it up. This was a long process. It was equivalent to replicating the results of these two tactics that she had developed over the past 10,000 years in this subworld from an impoverished state. Compared to that, the accumulation of power units was simpler and more convenient. Her soul was quite powerful in itself, and she could accumulate power units on her own without any special training postures. After she obtained an official identity, the speed of accumulation was quite gratifying. It's already 0.75 units. Nan Xiaonan was rather pleased with the progress, which was the result of a single day's work. In the first 2 days, she had been wholeheartedly writing spells, which was why she did not divert her attention to accumulating power units. An increase in power units meant an increase in self-preservation, and she was certainly much more confident against unknown dangers. Most importantly, she did not believe that she would be so unlucky as to run into someone as good as Luochio. Still, there was nothing wrong with being careful. After returning to the apartment, Nan Xiaonan activated her true sight and monitored everything around her. Otherwise, she would have been able to accumulate more power units. Under true sight's observation, the body of the assassin she had found a few days ago was gone. Nan Xiaonan had also been paying special attention over the last 2 days, but there were no reports of that, and it appeared that the assassin's body had been taken away by his companions. There were no clues left in the house. Still, Nan Xiaonan did not let her guard down. She would rather accumulate power units slowly to ensure her own safety. When she thought about the issue of safety, Nan Xiaonan felt a little disappointed. She wished that the organization that was chasing after the identity of Nan Xiaonan would have made their move when she was staying in Ren Xiling's house. That way, she could have used the world will or Luochio's power to wipe out the organization once and for all. Unfortunately, it was just a disconnect and reconnect operation. Nan Xiaonan shook her head, tiptoed to put the bottle of jam on the top cupboard, and pushed it inside. When the cupboard door closed, Nan Xiaonan swallowed hard. One more spoonful. One more, and I won't eat any more. Worst comes to worst, I'll just recommend myself as a pillow. So she opened the cupboard happily, then tiptoed and reached her hand into the cupboard. What's this? Nan Xiaonan was stunned and glanced at the thing she found at the top of the cupboard. It was a USB flash drive. Nan Xiaonan turned her eyes and frowned. At this moment, she did not care about the food. She quickly walked to the table, inserted the USB flash drive, and began to browse the contents of the USB flash drive. The fluorescent light of the screen flashed in her pupils. Nan Xiaonan's expression gradually became a little strange. These things are... The light was reflected in the rear window of the blue Masa CEO car, and the floating light flitted across Song Ying's fair face. There was a MacBook Pro on her crossed legs, and she was focused on the screen. In the front seat were the driver and the bodyguards, and behind the car was an Alpha with several bodyguards. Miss, with our funds, we shouldn't need to seek cooperation, right? The person who asked the question was an assistant sitting next to Song Ying. She was temporarily transferred from the school in the Song family's secret village and had just started the business of the new company. Even so, when the assistant saw the documents of the new company, she could not help but have a strange expression. The company's registered holder was not Song Ying, but Master Chiu. Miss Song Ying actually did not have any shares in the company and only received a salary of the CEO. This inevitably caused this top student from the village school to begin to imagine the internal affairs of the Song family. We don't lack funds. Song Ying closed the computer. But what we lack is time and space. This time, we're going to meet Mr. House, who has a fairly good factory in China and a very good sales channel. Moreover, he has a very deep cooperative relationship with one of the 4 major families in Beijing, the Zhao family. If we can use this Mr. House as a platform, then we can quickly gain a foothold. Is this the information that Miss Zhang prepared for you? The assistant asked curiously. Song Ying said indifferently, "It's just mutual benefit." That old Madame Zhang is an important figure in the business circle in southern China. In particular, several big shots of the Chamber of Commerce in the province are her students. It would be a waste if we don't use these resources. Besides, we deal with a lot of things for the old Madam's Li family every year. This time, our Song family has the opportunity to come back and develop, so she's naturally happy to do us a favor. This old Madam is not easy to deal with. The assistant shook his head and said teasingly, "Miss, you didn't like dealing with these old fogies before. This time, you're working so hard for young Master Chiu's company. He'll be very touched when he finds out." Touch my ass. It's good enough that he's not angry at me. I can't even find him these few days. Didn't I say that he doesn't need to care? I was just being polite, but this deadhead actually acted like nothing happened. Sigh, miss, you shouldn't have let Master Chiu so quickly. The assistant sighed. Men are all big pig trotters. In broad daylight, Master Chiu and Miss Song Ying spent a long time in the car. Then, Miss Song Ying said that her waist hurt. Through the "I have something to tell you, but you must not tell anyone" route, the news had spread to the mysterious village of the Song family in South America. Although it could not be said that everyone knew about it, it did not seem to be a secret either. What? Song Ying was stunned. What did big pig trotters mean? Chapter 1250. In a private lounge on the 27th floor of the hotel, a white-haired foreign old man was looking at the night outside. At the same time, a young man walked in quickly from outside the door. "Boss, we found Nan Xiaonan." She returned to her original apartment. The white-haired old man took out a handkerchief from his pocket and covered his mouth. After coughing twice, he seemed to want to stand up. The young man quickly went forward to support him. "You couldn't find her these past few days. You only found out when she returned to her apartment." The white-haired old man looked at the young man beside him indifferently. "Jimmy, should I start to doubt your ability to work?" The young man. Jimmy lowered his head and didn't dare to speak. In fact, there were 2 things that he didn't understand until now. The first thing was that killer number 7, who was sent to assassinate Nan Xiaonan, was found to have been killed by a bullet from his own sniper rifle. The sniper rifle only fired 1 shot, and the people sent to clean up couldn't find any traces of someone breaking into the place where killer number 7 was lying in wait. Killer number 7 didn't seem to have let go of the sniper rifle before he died. Judging from his situation, the moment he was shot, he should have been crouching on the windowsill, preparing to shoot. Jimmy remembered that before the shot was confirmed, number 7 even talked to him. The other thing was that the people who were tracking Nan Xiaonan said that they couldn't see Nan Xiaonan these past few days, but she was obviously at work. "Why aren't you talking?" The white-haired old man raised his voice. Jimmy said seriously, "I've already set number 4 and number 5 to watch her 24 hours a day. If Qin Jun is still alive, he will definitely be exposed. Then I will catch him and personally bring him a boss. I'll wait for your good news." The white-haired old man slowly sighed. At this moment, a man in a suit walked in respectfully. "Mr. House, there's a Miss Song outside who says she wants to see you. She asked me to give you this." Jimmy took the envelope from the man's hand and opened it to find a card inside. He didn't open the card and just handed it to the white-haired old man. "Mr. House." Mr. House opened it and took a look. He frowned and looked at the man who walked in. "Who else did Miss Song bring?" The man said There's one who looks like an assistant, and a few who look like bodyguards. Mr. House pondered for a moment, then nodded and said, "Arrange for a meeting." "Got it." The man quickly turned and left. Jimmy was puzzled. "Boss, who is this Miss Song?" Mr. House shook his head and raised the card in his hand. "I don't know who this Miss Song is for the time being, but I do know who the owner of this card is. I still have to give her some face." "Who is it?" "The leader of the Southern China business circle, the old lady of the Zhang family." Mr. House put away the card. "Accompany me to meet her. This old lady wouldn't give out a recommendation letter so easily. Since you can get this old lady to help, you should have some ability." "Got it." Jimmy nodded. "In the reception room. By the way, what do you mean by pig trotters?" Song Ying, who was waiting in the reception room, sat up straight. However, she thought of the unfinished conversation in the car, so she turned her body slightly and asked the assistant next to her. It's a Chinese internet term. I've been watching web dramas recently and saw it in the bullet screen. The general meaning is that men are good at everything, but they're careless and slow." "Oh." Song Ying nodded in realization. "Luochio is careless." "I don't think so. He's slow at this moment." The sound of the door opening interrupted Miss Song Ying's wild thoughts. She saw a white-haired old man walking in slowly with a walking stick. Behind him was a handsome young man. As the president of the Song dynasty for more than a year, Song Ying had seen many so-called young talents. However, it was rare to see someone like this young man. However, she paid more attention to this Mr. House. At the same time, she began to read about him in her mind. This old man was already 90 years old. He had experienced World War II and served as a captain in a certain country. Before the war, he was already a drug smuggler. His method of starting his business was nothing more than smuggling rare drugs during wartime. In the 80s and 90s of the last century, he was already very famous in Europe as a medicine producer and philanthropist. In the late 90s, he was even conferred a title by the Danish royal family and was given a title. 10 years ago, when he started to expand the overseas market, the first thing he targeted was China. In the past 2 years, he had spent most of his time in China. He told the outside world that it was because he liked China's Beijing opera culture. Hello, Mr. House. Whether it was out of respect for the old man or as a party seeking cooperation, she had to take the initiative to greet him. Song Ying extended her hand to Mr. House with a smile. "Miss Song." Mr. House just reached out and shook his hand gently. "I saw your invitation. You were introduced by old Madame Zhang. Is there anything I can help you with?" Song Ying smiled confidently. "Mr. House, before we start talking, I have something I want you to take a look at." Under Song Ying's gaze, the assistant brought out the documents that had been prepared long ago. "Mr. House, these are our company's products." "Oh." Mr. House nodded and sat down. He flipped open the documents and read them carefully. Song Ying also sat down and looked straight ahead. She just didn't like Mr. House's youthful gaze. Most of the young talents she had met would look at her with similar gazes. She had long gotten used to it. A moment later, "These products." Mr. House raised his head slightly and glanced at Song Ying. Song Ying only smiled slightly and didn't say anything. Mr. House suppressed his impatience and lowered his head to read again. This time, his expression became even more focused. After a while, Mr. House closed the documents and placed them on the table. After a moment of silence, he said, "Miss Song, you want to cooperate with me? What do you think of these products, Mr. House?" Mr. House said calmly, "The data looks very good. If the 3 products you listed here can be manufactured, it will be a blessing for many patients, especially the anti-cancer drug mentioned here. It's better than the current mainstream drugs. To be honest, I'm very curious why this drug has never been reported before." The assistant smiled calmly and said, "Because ever since these drugs were developed, they have never been brought out. But these 2 days, we have already completed the patent application. Mr. House, this is the professional certificate." The assistant took out another document and placed it on the table. But Mr. House didn't look at it this time. Instead, he asked, "Miss Song, why are you looking for me?" Song Ying went straight to the point. "I hope to sign a production and overseas sales contract with Mr. House. I intend to sign the overseas sales rights for these 3 drugs to you." Mr. House smiled and said, "Miss Song, since your company can develop these drugs, I'm sure you don't lack funds. I'm very curious why I've never heard of you in the pharmaceutical industry. My family keeps a low profile. Song Ying maintained her smile and said, "This time, my family intends to use these products in order to make a big impact." Mr. House said happily, "Then, let me congratulate you on your success first. If these 3 drugs can be put into the market, I can't imagine what heights they will reach. To be honest, I'm very happy to sign this overseas sales contract. Of course, the prerequisite is that all of this is real. We have a lot of data from our on-the-spot experiments." Song Ying said seriously, "Of course, I'm prepared to visit Mr. House. I chose to cooperate with Mr. House because your company's conditions are very mature." Mr. House laughed. "Miss Song, why don't you sign the domestic sales rights to me as well?" But Song Ying said, "Our company intends to do the domestic sales ourselves." Mr. House smiled and didn't say yes or no. He just said apologetically, "Miss Song, I've been feeling a little unwell recently. I want to go back and rest first. As for the cooperation, let's talk again when we have the chance. This is Jimmy. When I've thought it through, I'll get him to contact you." "Of course." Song Ying nodded with a smile. The assistant gave Jimmy his contact information. After that, Jimmy took the document and helped Mr. House out of the reception room. After a while, a waiter from the bar came over with a bottle of red wine, saying that it was for Mr. House. The assistant opened the bottle and poured a glass for Song Ying. "This Mr. House doesn't seem very interested. I don't think he's faking it." Song Ying held the glass of red wine and muttered, "These drugs were developed by Mr. Blind. They've always been the village's specialty. I can guarantee that these are definitely better than any other similar products in the market." This old man shouldn't be unmoved. Could it be because of the pricing? The assistant thought. Song Ying shook her head. "There are 2 pricing options. The overseas pricing is very profitable. Anyone would be moved. And the overseas sales are our source of profit. But Grandpa means that we have to do the domestic sales ourselves, and we have to do it at the cheapest price. This is a form of attitude. Letting the government know our Song family's attitude can also be a form of repayment. If Grandpa wants to gain a foothold in the country and the Song family wants to return to its roots, we can't do the same business as before. The only thing we could do to get on good terms with the government is the drug business. If the local drugs can fight against the imported drugs and solve the problem of patients being unable to afford the drugs, this is the answer that the Song family will give to the government. This is the only way we can get support and save time. It's also a form of allegiance." The assistant said, "What if this Mr. House doesn't intend to give up the domestic sales rights?" Song Ying shook her head and said, "Then let's continue to talk to him. The profits from overseas sales are enough to move any businessman. This old man can't be unaware of the profits. He's not answering directly and is just putting on airs. For the next few days, we won't take the initiative to contact him. He won't be able to resist. Besides, it's not that we can't do without House. It's just that our Song family has to use this house." "Young miss, does father have any other intentions?" Song Ying glanced at the assistant. If she was just someone from the Song Huangchao group, Song Ying didn't intend to say it. It was just that she was chosen by the village. "House is just the first step for us to get close to the Zhao family in the capital." "The Zhao family in the capital?" Song Ying nodded and said seriously, "You're from the village. You should know the history of our Song family. Back then, why did Grandpa's family fall apart, and why did he go into exile abroad?" "Miss, you mean the Zhao family?" Song Ying put down the wine glass without taking a sip and said calmly, "There are some clues, but it's enough." The assistant hurriedly said, "If it's really the Zhao family, then—" Song Ying shook her head, her eyes fierce. "This is different from South America. The Zhao family has deep roots in the country. However, when it comes to using capital to defeat, I, Song Ying, have never been afraid of anyone." "Mrs. Mighty," the assistant flattered. Song Ying rolled her eyes. "In the future, watch less stupid dramas and focus on work. The next year is very important for the new company." "Okay." The assistant nodded and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. She was rather glad that Miss Song Ying didn't have the habit of watching dramas. Song Ying had very few entertainment activities. The only way to relieve her stress was to race. However, the country was different from South America. Not only were the roads congested, but there were also more traffic lights. She had to stop before she could even shift to fifth gear. Miss, are we going back to rest now? Song Ying thought for a while and shook her head. No, let's go to the new company. I want to see how the renovation is going. Go back and sort out the work report from Song Huanchao for me. It should still be early there. I'll have a video conference later. The assistant complained in her heart, but didn't dare to say much. She nodded and agreed. Boss, Miss Song has left. Mr. House lowered his head and rubbed his forehead slowly with his fingers. He didn't say anything. Jimmy said, Boss, are you thinking about this collaboration? Mr. House shook his head. The profits from these new drugs are very high. If it were in the past, I might have signed on without hesitation. But now I'm not in the mood. Jimmy nodded. Mr. House started coughing again. Jimmy quickly took out some medicine and let Mr. House take it. After a while, he recovered, but his face was full of dejection. He sighed and suddenly looked at the young and handsome Jimmy. Even if I had 10 times my net worth, I still wouldn't be as good as you. Jimmy lowered his head and didn't say anything. He knew very well what this old man was afraid of. Mr. House's interest waned. He waved his hand and said, I'm going to rest. You can go out. I'll leave this collaboration to you. After 2 days, you can go and talk to Miss Song again. Okay. Zhong Luochin and 24 were looking at the person inside the glass house through the glass walls. Inside the glass house, there was a sloppy man with clumps of hair and a face full of dirt. His gaze was unfocused, and there was a silly smile on his face from time to time. Looking at the silly man inside, 24 said, This one won't do. He's too old and crazy. It's best if he's young and has a pure mind. The success rate will be higher. Zhong Luochan said indifferently, This kind of child is far more valuable than this silly man. It won't be too late to use good material when you can guarantee the success rate. What a cheap kindness. 24 didn't comment. He walked into the glass house with a strange smile and then lowered the curtain. Soon after, screams came from inside. Chapter 1251. Not long after, the miserable and painful cries suddenly stopped. It wasn't a fading sound, but an abrupt stop without warning. Zhong Luochin's expression changed. He looked at the time and realized that he had been standing like this for more than an hour. The slight numbness in his legs also proved that he had been standing for some time. The door slowly opened. 24's messy hair came into Zhong Luochin's sight. There was no other expression on his face except indifference. He was even more ruthless than the doctor who came out of the operating room. He said lightly, Failure, find me again when you're ready for the next material. Zhong Luochin frowned imperceptibly. 24 walked past him with a yawn. After that, the second young master of the Zhong family took a deep breath and strode into the glass house. He saw that the crazy homeless man from outside was squatting on the ground like a frog. His eyeballs were also like a frog's, moving irregularly from left to right. His agitated throat was making strange sounds that didn't belong to human beings. A chill gradually spread from his back. But right at that moment, the tramp, who no longer looked like a human, suddenly reached out and grabbed his own tongue, pulling it with all his might. His eyes began to move even more crazily, as if he was in a state of excitement. Finally, his tongue was pulled out. Zhong Luochin took half a step back. The smell of blood in the air made his body react. He walked out of the room and bent down at the door to vomit. Second young master, are you okay? Seeing this, the staff in charge of security rushed forward. Zhong Luochin reached out to stop them and slowly straightened up. I'm fine. You can clean up the things inside. They looked at each other and nodded. One of them mustered up his courage and walked in. Immediately, he sucked in a mouthful of light and felt his stomach churn. When he walked out with a pale face, Zhong Luochin had already left. 2 days passed peacefully. Song Ying, who was working in a temporarily empty office on one of the floors of an office building owned by the Zhang family, received the expected message from Mr. House. In the future, Mr. House's assistant, Jimmy, would be in charge of the collaboration on the new drug, and Jimmy would be paying a personal visit today. Regarding the initial proposal for cooperation, the negotiation went very smoothly. Under the premise that the new drug had huge prospects and profits, Mr. House, on behalf of Mr. House, happily signed the initial cooperation contract. "Nice to meet you, Miss Song." After an entire morning of discussion, a charming smile appeared on this young talent's face. He wanted to invite Song Ying for lunch. Miss Song should have just arrived here not long ago, right? Would you do me the honor of introducing some local delicacies to you? Song Ying did not reject the other party's invitation right after signing the temporary cooperation contract. Moreover, Song Ying could not find a reason to reject this kind of social behavior, so she could only agree. She wasn't afraid that offending Mr. House's assistant would cause problems in their future cooperation. If Mr. House wasn't a fool, he would naturally understand the value of these new drugs owned by the Song family. These medicines were developed by Mr. Blind, a genius of the present age, in a pharmaceutical company invested in by the Song family. The warriors in the Song family's village often entered and exited dangerous battlefields, and even participated in the wars of certain countries as mercenaries. The mortality rate had always been very high, and it was only after the special agent's pharmaceutical factory began to develop all kinds of life-saving drugs that this number dropped. The few new drugs selected this time were only in the mid-range among the many research and development products of the Song family's private pharmaceutical factory. The truly advanced drugs often cost tens of millions of dollars to produce. Naturally, they were not suitable for large-scale production and were very difficult to produce. Last year, only a few special health pills were produced, but Dad had already taken them away. But this was Mr. Blind's idea. Back then, it was for Luochio to use. Song Ying had only eaten 2 of those health pills, so she knew how precious they were. It wasn't that the Song family was reluctant to let their descendants use this special medicine all the time, but could not be taken too much, or it would be bad for them. Song Ying herself had personally experienced the wonders of the various new drugs in the Song family's private pharmaceutical factory, so she was very confident in these drugs. "Then I'll go change my clothes." Leaving Jimmy to wait in the reception room, Song Ying returned to the temporary office. She lifted her hair as if she was thinking about something. Then, Song Ying picked up the phone as if she had made a decision. "You don't want to go out today?" In front of the dressing table, after combing Lia's hair until it was straight and smooth, Luochio gently pressed down on her shoulder, leaned over, and asked softly. Luochio didn't say anything. She just looked up and blinked, but the message was enough. Luochio smiled slightly, knowing that Luochio was not in good spirits. She wasn't sleepy, but she was awake for a very short time every day, and most of the time she would be asleep. This wasn't a problem with her body. On the contrary, her physical condition was quite good. Although she had lost her strength, her physical strength alone was quite terrifying. When a young girl was awake, she could easily crush a diamond into pieces with her fingers. "Are you sleepy?" Loya nodded, then turned around and hugged Luochio's waist, lying comfortably. Luochio reached out and stroked the back of her head, as if to comfort her. Mian Mian. Not long after, the girl's breathing had calmed down, and Luochio called out softly. In the air, a pink pillow suddenly jumped out with 4 limbs spread out. The only thing missing was the special effect of releasing little stars around it. "Take good care of her." "Yes, master." Mian Mian's body instantly swelled to the size of a bed. Luochio picked Lia up and placed her on Mian Mian before walking out of the room. Outside the door, Miss Maid stood quietly with her hands clasped together. Luochio smiled and said, "It seems that Luya won't be able to eat the lunch you made today." The servant girl said softly, "Master, don't you plan to solve the problem of Miss Lia's deep sleep?" Basically, the servant girl could easily understand what her master meant, but the only thing she couldn't figure out was his attitude towards Loya. Luochio shook his head. "It's not that I haven't thought about it, but I don't know why, but I feel that it's better to let nature take its course. It's something like intuition." As he spoke, Luochio walked down, and the servant girl followed behind. "Master's protagonist has always been very accurate." Luochio said casually, "I might only have this that can't be considered an advantage. By the way, how's the design going? Everything is going well. Yi thought and said, it should be able to officially go online in that world before Master leaves. Since you said it was going well, there naturally wouldn't be a problem. Boss Luo had never doubted the servant girl's ability to work. Luochio joked, after officially going online, I may not be able to get rid of the identity of a useless person. The servant girl understood the meaning of her master's words. Since Chun Mingming, the club hadn't officially opened for business for a long time. There was almost no such interval before. Even when Luochio took a personal vacation last time, he gave the authority to Yu Yi to act as a temporary store manager. The servant girl had served the club for more than 300 years, and she had some guesses about the current situation. In just 1 year, the new master's control of the shop seemed to have surpassed that of the previous master. Master, you don't plan to accept individual customers? That's not it. Luochio shook his head. It's just not as urgent as before. Why? Do you prefer the way it was before? The servant girl suddenly leaned her head on Luochio's body and whispered, You doesn't need to teach Master anything now. Dance with me. After saying that, the entire lobby began to serve Luochio. Accompanied by the music of the old gramophone, the master and the servant girl's figures began to sway slowly in the lobby. Yu Yi remembered that at the beginning, the new master didn't know anything, but he was also so leisurely. Now, there was no difference from before. Time was such a thing. It was just a notification of a text message, which finally interrupted the master and the servant girl when the song was about to end. Luochio looked at the content of the message, revealing a thoughtful expression. You may not need to make lunch for me. The servant girl opened her mouth slightly. Luochio raised his mobile phone. It was a text message from Song Ying. Master, are you going? Luochio nodded and muttered, Don't you think it's a little strange that the dimension observers keep appearing? Then I'll prepare clothes for you. The restaurant was located in a private club. The boss came from France and was a standard 3-star Michelin chef. Naturally, the guests who came here were also celebrities. Luochio's appearance did not alarm the security guards in front of the club. Instead, he arrived at the appointed place 5 minutes early. However, when he arrived, he saw a woman wearing a suit and skirt. She was standing there with a set of clothes in her hand. When the woman saw Luochio, she was startled at first. Then, she steadily walked over and said, Master Chiu, how do you do? How do you do? Have we met before? Luochio asked with some curiosity. The woman revealed a faint smile and blinked her eyes before saying, Master Chiu, I'm from the village. I'm in the same batch as Gan Hong. However, I studied business management. You can call me Ziyin. Did Song Ying ask you to wait for me? Luochio nodded his head, which could be considered as a greeting. Ziyin quickly said, Miss Ying can't leave now. She asked me to wait for you here and prepare something for you. I was afraid that you would wait for a while, but it seems that it's not necessary. Ziyin helplessly waved the prepared clothes and showed a playful action of sticking out her tongue. Someone prepared it for me. Therefore, Boss Luo felt that he was walking further and further on the road of being a useless person. The clothes on him were naturally chosen by Miss Maid. He was even dressed up before he went out. It seemed that he would encounter some difficulties because of the problem, which had never happened to Boss Luo. Naturally, he could feel how meticulous Miss Maid's care was. Master Chiu, is your clothes designed by Astaroth? Unexpectedly, Ziyin suddenly opened her eyes wide. Astaroth. Ziyin nodded. Yes, Astaroth is the most mysterious fashion designer. No one knows whether it's a man or a woman. And Astaroth is the top in the fashion design industry. Many rich people can't get a piece of work, even if they spend a lot of money. Luochio lowered his head and looked at it. He didn't care too much when he put it on and asked curiously, Why do you say so? Ziyin pointed at Luochio's collar and said, Here, do you see this pin? This is Astaroth's unique symbol. I'm the most loyal slave of Astaroth's works. I definitely won't recognize it wrong. What slave? Luochio smiled and took off the pin on his collar. He smiled and said, Okay, go in. Don't let them wait for too long. Although she didn't understand Luochio's action, Ziyin didn't say anything. Instead, she said softly, Master Chiu, it's right to go in early. If you go in late, I don't know how that Jimmy will attack again. Master Chiu, Missing is actually very tired. In the past, she often had to face these crazy bees and butterflies. Wait for you. You must let this Jimmy know how to retreat. In Luochio's opinion, Song Ying's character was probably enough to make people retreat from the beginning. Then, under Ziyun's lead, Luochio walked into the club's restaurant, but boss Luo fell to gaze from afar. He turned his head to take a look, only to see a figure flash by not far away and soon disappeared. Are there any guests who haven't arrived today? Luochio suddenly asked. Ziyun was stunned and shook her head. No, it's just this Jimmy who invited Miss Ying for a meal. Master Chiu, let me tell you about this Jimmy. The company is now cooperating with a rich foreign businessman. This Jimmy was sent by the other party. This cooperation, Miss Ying's friend hasn't arrived yet. He should be here soon. Song Ying kept smiling. How should I address him later? Jimmy asked with a smile. His surname is Luo. Song Ying said casually and looked out of the window. Jimmy quickly searched for people with the surname Luo in his mind. However, Miss Song had appeared out of thin air, so he didn't know if this person with the surname Luo had appeared out of thin air as well. The door of the private room slowly opened. Jimmy naturally recognized the assistant beside Song Ying. As for the young man who came in next to the assistant, he must be the person Song Ying was waiting for. He looked at him carefully. Song Ying frowned first, then left her seat and walked quickly to Luochio. She stretched out her hand naturally and turned to Jimmy. Come, let me introduce you. This is the real boss of our company. Jimmy's expression didn't change. He walked forward with a smile and reached out his hand. Hello, Mr. Luo, nice to meet you. I'm Jimmy, the representative of your company. Don't stand and talk. Please take a seat. Seeing Jimmy return to his seat first, Song Ying suddenly frowned again. Her nose twitched, and she smelled a light perfume. Chapter 1252. If one looked closely, they would find that Jimmy had European features, and his pupils were not Asian. There was no doubt that he was a mixed race. Elegant and witty, this was a man who could easily attract the attention of socialites. He had the strong aura of a business elite. Do you believe in fate? Jimmy smiled, revealing his white and neat teeth. He looked at Luochio and asked. Ever since Luochio came in, Jimmy's eyes had been on Luochio. Although his eyes were still burning when he looked at Song Ying, he obviously maintained some restraint and distance. He didn't make people feel abrupt or aggressive. Boss Luo was holding the peas on the plate with the back of a knife and poking a few peas with a fork. He hadn't had time to put them into his mouth yet, so he became interested in this topic. Boss Luo naturally liked fate more than ordinary people. He thought for a while and said, Mr. Jimmy, what do you think fate should be? Seeing Song Ying look at him, Jimmy picked up the cup with his left hand and took a sip of water. He said slowly, someone once said that we will meet about 29. 2 million people in our lifetime, but the probability of 2 people falling in love is only 0.0000049%, which is 49 out of a million. In the vast sea of people, the chances of men and women, or even people of the same sex, from meeting to falling in love are so low. But around us, there are people who love each other all the time. Don't you think this is fate? That's a romantic way of putting it. It's not really probability. Song Ying ruined the atmosphere and said, Besides, how did the number 29, 3 million come about? Have you done a sampling experiment? Jimmy was stunned for a moment. Then he smiled bitterly. He raised his glass with his left hand and toasted the two of them. This once heard that has always been successful in the past has become nonsense when it comes to Miss Song. Miss Song, please forgive my ignorance. Her assistant, Ziyun, who was accompanying her at the table, sighed in her heart. It would be strange if her missing knew how to be romantic. Her mind was probably filled with stock tickers. For a person who didn't even have a copy of Pride and Prejudice in her bookcase, romance was like playing the lute to a cow. Of course, this talent had used the wrong method. However, Ziyun naturally wouldn't point it out. Can't you see that the main character is still sitting next to you? The little assistant stole a glance at Master Chiu. She was thinking more about the mysterious designer, Astaroth, and felt a little strange. She was from the Song family's village school, specializing in business and social relations. Didn't they say that this Master Chio grew up in an ordinary family? What was with the old-fashioned palace etiquette that only a few ancient European nobles knew? Missing couldn't see it. She barely passed the social dance class. This talent Jimmy couldn't see it either. Although this kind of talent packaged himself, well, there were some essential things that couldn't be packaged. Although this lunch seemed to be Jimmy's humor, Zian liked this young Master Chio's occasional one or two sentences. According to the school's theory of self-cultivation, it was to hide one's strength and bide one's time. Thinking about it, the little assistant attracted the attention of this Master Chio. Luo Chio just smiled faintly. Then, he stretched out his finger and pointed at his lips. Ziyun was startled. Only then did she realize that there was some sauce on her lips. At this moment, Master Chio suddenly spoke, which immediately attracted the attention of Jimmy and Miss Sing. Ziyun took the opportunity to quickly wipe her lips with a napkin. At least she didn't forget herself. Actually, I think Mr. Jimmy's words are very interesting. Luochio's voice wasn't loud, but made people want to continue listening. Songing was quite touched by this. This dead head seemed to be transparent when he didn't speak, but when he spoke, his words were meaningless and would immediately become the focus of attention. In fact, Songing was quite helpless about this. Well, the perfume smell came again. Why do you say that? Song-ing asked expressionlessly. Luochio looked at her and said, let's put it another way. As long as there are people in the world, there will be opportunities for people to know and love each other. Probability also believes in opportunities, right? Miss Ying's heart skipped a beat when she heard the first half of the sentence, but she couldn't help but roll her eyes when she heard the second half. So angry. Do you know why I asked you to come here? Why are you trying to undermine me? Excuse me for a moment. I need to go to the washroom. Jimmy stood up and nodded in acknowledgement. Ziyin noticed that the atmosphere was a bit strange, so she said, Miss, young master, I'm going to touch up my makeup too. Take your time, huh? The waiters were all waiting outside, so only Luochio and Song-Ying were left in the room. Today, Miss Ying was wearing a black dress. She had already taken off her jacket. The weather in March and April was actually quite cold, but there was a heater in the room. However, it was inevitable that small bumps would appear on her fair skin. She couldn't help but hug her arms and wipe them gently. However, the legendary scene of taking off her clothes and putting them on didn't happen. Luochio just turned up the heater and asked the waiters outside to bring new hot tea. The more she thought about it, the angrier she got. Miss Ying said indifferently, your clothes are not bad. Did your girlfriend pick them out for you? Yes. Luochio nodded. Miss Ying rolled her eyes. She didn't feel good about it. You're quite straightforward. You should learn from Jimmy. If it were him, he wouldn't admit it. Are you feeling unwell these days? Miss Ying, who had punched cotton many times, could only say helplessly, I'm fine. I haven't even started yet. Of course, I have to be busy. Thank you for your concern. Are you concerned about me? Luochio nodded. I think I should be concerned about you. Don't you like it? Like? I don't believe you. Song-Ying sighed. She held her forehead and looked at him, as if she was trying to make eye contact. After a while, she felt something draped over her body. Song-Ying was startled. She raised her eyes and took a peek. It was just her jacket hanging on the chair. Luochio walked to the window sill and seemed to be looking at the scenery outside. This made Song-Ying feel that he just did it casually. She sighed helplessly. Luochio opened the window a little, and the cold wind blew in. Song-Ying felt the coolness from outside, which helped to disperse the stuffy smell in the room. Luochio said, spring is coming. Spring in March and April. Song-Ying was startled. She looked out the window. The curtain was opened by Luochio, so she could see the exquisiteness of the club's courtyard. Cherry trees were planted here. The blooming period of cherry blossoms was very short. They were gorgeous and fell at the same time. Song-Ying was fascinated by them. Her body became lazy. Cherry blossoms in March and April. She suddenly said, Hey, do you think it's okay if I dye my hair back? Well, it's a young man with the surname Luo. He seems to be from a big family, but there's little information about him. In the bathroom, Jimmy was on the phone with Mr. House, reporting some things. This Song-Ying doesn't seem to follow the Luo guy's orders. but she should pay attention to this person. We don't know what their relationship is yet. However, Mr. House didn't seem to be interested in this. He said a few words and ended the call. The old man was in his twilight years, but Jimmy was still in his prime and full of energy. Naturally, he was 100 times more interested in business than Mr. House. After hanging up the phone, Jimmy suddenly sneered. However, the smile disappeared in a flash. When he looked in the mirror again, he was back to his usual polite self. At this moment, someone came into the bathroom. He was wearing a windbreaker and a hat. The hat was pulled down, so only half of his face could be seen. Jimmy looked at the person walking in through the mirror in confusion. He knew that the person had stopped and was standing behind him. A look of surprise flashed across Jimmy's face, and he immediately turned around. The person happened to raise his head at this time. Jimmy looked at the person's face and suddenly opened his mouth. He took a small step back and hit the sink. Zian had already touched up her makeup. She returned to the door of the private room, but didn't go in. She asked the waiter outside if Mr. Jimmy was back. After getting no reply, she stood outside the door and waited. She told the two waiters not to go in. At this time, Zian received a message from Mr. Jimmy. He said that he had something to do and left. The lunch bill had been paid. Although she was confused, Zian didn't care too much. After waiting for nearly half an hour, Zian felt that it was about time, so she pushed the door and went in. At this time, Song Ying was leaning on the table, and Luochio was standing in front of the window. The two were looking at the scenery outside. Zian covered her mouth and snickered. Then she said, "Miss, young master, I'm sorry. I just received a call and came back late." Song Ying woke up from a very comfortable state and responded with an "oh." Zian said, "Mr. Jimmy just left me a message saying that he had something to do and had to leave. He asked me to apologize to you and ask for your forgiveness next time." Miss Ying waved her hand and said, "Next time, just ask him to leave. He's such a glib talker. You can deal with him for me. That Mr. House only sent his assistant, so you can do it for me. We're of equal status." Luochio chuckled as he listened. "What are you laughing at? Did I say something wrong?" Song Ying rolled her eyes. Zian walked up and reminded her softly, "Miss, that's not how you use equal status. It's used when people arrange marriages. It means that their family backgrounds are similar. You're so good at Chinese." Song Ying exploded. "This Jimmy doesn't look bad. Be careful, or I'll really have to marry you to him." She was not like young Master Song, who was proficient in Chinese culture. She spent most of her time studying abroad. If it were not for the fact that the Song family had always maintained Chinese traditions, they would have been completely westernized. "Miss, that's not what I meant." Zian looked at young Master Chio with a pleading look. "Can you order a plate of fried rice for me?" Luochio said casually, "I don't think I'm full." Let's see what Song Ying likes to eat." She didn't eat much just now. Right away, Zian walked out of the door quickly as if she had been granted amnesty. Song Ying glared at Luochio unhappily. Boss Luo smiled and said, "By the way, how have Grandpa and Song Howard been doing recently? Can you tell me about them?" Song Ying shook her head and said coquettishly, "You're so good at changing topics." She sighed again. "Forget it. I won't argue with you. Come here. I'll tell you about Grandpa and Song Howard." They ate lunch for more than an hour before they left the club. Song Ying wanted to give Luochio a ride, but she was rejected. Therefore, Miss Ying's dissatisfaction finally exploded in the car. She looked at Ziyun and said, "Ziyun, from today onwards, you're forbidden from watching TV. Miss, you'd better marry me off. Night, Austin Pharmaceuticals." Jimmy walked quickly in the corridor. The security guards who passed by would greet him respectfully when they saw him, until he arrived at Mr. House's office. Other than Mr. House, there were 2 doctors and 3 nurses. Mr. House's arm was still hooked up to an 4 drip. Mr. House seemed to have been waiting for a while and was resting with his eyes closed. Jimmy looked around the office before walking to Mr. House. He lowered his voice and said, "I'm sorry, boss. I was delayed by something." Mr. House slowly opened his eyes and looked at Jimmy in surprise. He then nodded and waved his hand to let the doctor pull out the needle. After that, the doctors and nurses packed up and left silently. Jimmy said, "Boss, your body. Mr. House shook his head and stood up with his crutches. He ordered Jimmy to lock the office door. When Jimmy locked the door, he heard a strange sound behind him. The display cabinet on the wall was separated from the middle. There was a secret room in the office. Jimmy's expression didn't change as he walked to Mr. House's side. Mr. House sighed slowly and said casually, "Come in with me to see the progress." After the two of them walked into the secret passage, the display cabinet slowly moved and finally closed. But soon, a dark red mark suddenly appeared on the locked door of the office. The mark flashed and disappeared. The next moment, the door lock opened automatically. After that, a woman wearing a leather jacket and leather pants, with a silver eye mask covering the upper half of her face, quickly walked in. After the woman came in, she looked around suspiciously and then fixed her gaze on the display cabinet. She came to the front of the cabinet and pondered for a moment. Then, she stretched out her finger and traced a dark red mark on the edge of the cabinet, similar to the one on the door lock. "Open it," the woman said softly. After passing through a short passageway, there was an iron staircase. Jimmy kept supporting Mr. House, and soon they arrived at an open space. As far as the eye could see, it was the size of a basketball court. Jimmy saw many strong men with weapons. They were not only stationed at the entrance, but also in front of many other passages that led here. There were all kinds of instruments and many researchers in white robes shuttling back and forth. In the center of this huge space, there was a huge prototype container with a pedestal. At this moment, a foreign man in his 50s came to Mr. House with a man and a woman. "I'm here to see him," Mr. House said directly. The person nodded at Mr. House and then nodded at Jimmy as a form of greeting. He took Jimmy's place and supported Mr. House as they walked towards the huge container. "When will it be done?" Mr. House suddenly asked as they got closer. The man said slowly, "Soon. The equation you sent me is indeed the part we've been missing all this time. We can do the final test tomorrow." Mr. House suddenly seemed to be in better spirits than ever before. He walked quickly to the container and even dropped his crutch on the ground. In front of the container, a young man saw Mr. House coming and pressed a button on a control panel on the container. In front of the sealed container, a 1-foot-long shell slowly opened. Jimmy's eyes narrowed slightly. Through the glass at the opening of the container, he could see a light green color inside. He could even see a human face through this small opening. It was vaguely similar to Mr. House's face. He seemed to be in a deep sleep. There was a feeding device in his mouth and nose. Mr. House's hand trembled slightly as he caressed this small mirror, as if caressing a treasure. Soon, at this moment, an extremely shrill alarm suddenly sounded in the sealed space. Someone has broken in. Chapter 1253. A black shadow flitted past the entrance, and one of the two guards at the entrance was hit in the abdomen. He fell to the ground, and the weapon in his hand was taken away by the attacker. Under the rapid sound of the alarm, all eyes were focused on the intruder. Several guards stood in front of Mr. House at this moment. The person who seemed to be the platoon leader of the guards quickly gave out orders. The next moment, several tongues of fire lit up, and several straight streams of bullets rained down on the intruder at the same time. However, the intruder was unusually agile. Like a huge black cat, she found cover in an instant. "What's going on? Why is there an intruder?" Mr. House looked flustered and exasperated as he looked at Jimmy angrily. Jimmy shook his head and furrowed his brows. He seemed to be puzzled about the intruder as well. However, there was only one intruder, and there were quite a number of well-armed guards. Naturally, they were not afraid. At this time, under the command of the captain, the 7 guards began to close in on the intruder's bunker. At this time, she who was hiding behind the cover glanced at the weapon in her hand. Kalashnikov, 1974. So this is the weapon of this civilization. She lowered her head and muttered. Then, her finger quickly drew a dark red imprint on the handle of the gun. When the imprint was completely integrated into the gun, it had a special characteristic that was similar to a life. In the next moment, her finger quickly drew 2 other imprints on the boots. After that, she slowly exhaled, bent her body, and exerted force. Behind the cover, A black shadow leaped out at an extremely fast speed. Before anyone could react, they heard the sound of bullets bursting out like firecrackers. The sound of gunshots rang out rapidly and paused for a moment. It seemed that there were only 7 shots, but the 7 guards who surrounded the intruder fell to the ground one after another. The 7 guards were all shot in the forehead, almost in the same place. They were all killed in one shot. 7 shots in a row while running, and they all hit the same spot on the guard, killing him in one shot. Most of the researchers might not be able to see the trick, but the rest of the guards here were different. Almost at the same time, all the guards felt a chill. The captain gritted his teeth and became incomparably dignified. Everyone, be careful. This person may have been trained as a top-secret agent. Escort the boss away immediately. Secret Service. Mr. House frowned. Could it be that they've found us? Mr. House's mind raced, but he didn't suspect anything at this point. Under the escort of several guards, he quickly headed for another passageway. However, the intruder did not intend to give up so easily. She jumped out again and ran on the wall, as if she was defying gravity. The Kalashnikov 1974 in her hand spat out bullets like crazy. Every time a bullet was fired, a guard fell to the ground silently. When there were only 3 bullets left in the Kalashnikov 1974's magazine, there was only 1 guard left at the scene, the captain of the guards. She also ended her unbelievable run on the wall and jumped to the ground. She held the Kalashnikov 1974 casually as if she was holding a long sword and walked over step by step. The team leader stood in front of Mr. House, while the other researchers were already hugging their heads in fear and hiding in various places. Mr. House took a deep breath. Although his face was pale, he still maintained his composure to the greatest extent. The situation in front of him was not as dangerous as the war he participated in when he was young, but it was not much different. "Who sent you here?" Mr. House stared at the intruder and asked in a low voice. "No one." She shook her head casually. "I don't have anyone behind me. I'm just here to solve a problem." "Is there a conflict of interest between us?" Mr. House asked again in a low voice. "Not at the moment, and in the future, naturally not." Her lips curved slightly under the silver eye mask, and she slowly raised the assault rifle in her hand. "What do you want? Wealth, status, or technology? I can give you all of them." Cold sweat broke out on Mr. House's forehead. "As long as you stop this violent behavior, no matter how powerful you are, as long as I seal this place, you can't escape. I spent 10 years building this place." "That's hard to say." She shrugged. "Didn't I come in without a key? This place can't trap me." "She's out of bullets." The captain suddenly shuddered and pressed the trigger without hesitation. The Kalashnikov 1974's bullet capacity was limited. The number of guards who had fallen flashed through his mind. He absolutely did not believe that the intruder could not miss a single shot or waste a single bullet while running on the wall in such an unbelievable manner. Bang! Yes. How is that possible? The one who fell was the captain of the guards who had been through hundreds of battles. Mr. House was shocked. Seeing the intruder walk directly toward him, he was even more terrified. The guards had fallen, and he had lost everything he relied on. "Please don't be impulsive." Mr. House retreated and soon retreated to the front of the huge container. His eyes were searching for someone who could help him. But all the researchers were hiding at the moment. Even though they quietly poked their heads out to watch, they obviously did not dare to make a move. At the same time, Mr. House saw his personal assistant, Jimmy, who had also found cover and was only poking his head out. Their eyes met, and it was not difficult for Mr. House to see panic and hesitation in Jimmy's eyes. Finally, she walked in front of Mr. House and pressed the Kalashnikov 1974 directly against Mr. House's chest, directly tearing the old man's last bit of strength to pieces. His breathing became rapid, his face became pale, and his body trembled. Her gaze moved from Mr. House to the observation hole in the container's shell, looking at the thing inside. "You guys seem to be in charge of this kind of technology, cloning. Is that right?" A smile appeared on her face. "If I'm not wrong, the thing inside is your clone, right? We have something to discuss, don't we, madam?" Mr. House keenly caught the other party's interest in talking. She said indifferently, "If I remember correctly, real human cloning is not allowed for the time being. You're dying, aren't you?" At this point, Mr. House gradually became less afraid. He nodded, his eyes filled with desire and fear, the gaze of a drowning man. "You'll never understand an old man's reluctance to live and his fear of death. If I had the ability, why wouldn't I try? I'm not interested in whether you're dying or not." She shook her head, smiled, and said, "I'm interested in the way life is replicated. Has he gained consciousness?" Mr. House wanted to keep quiet, but the muzzle on his chest exerted some force. He could only say helplessly, "His body structure is stabilizing, and we've already detected brain waves. The cerebral cortex has begun to become active last month. We speculate that he should have gained consciousness." "Is that so?" She said indifferently, "You probably haven't mastered the method of consciousness transfer yet. Then even if you create a clone of yourself, it'll only be a new life. It won't be able to extend yourself at all." Mr. House kept quiet. She suddenly sneered and said, "To be honest, I prefer honest people. There are still some things you haven't said, right? Gene Zero. How did you know?" Mr. House raised his head abruptly. "You don't have to worry about that." She shook her head, then patted Mr. House's cheek with the muzzle of the gun. "Let your researchers complete the last step. I also want to see your technology." As she said that, the moment Mr. House lowered his head in contemplation, she suddenly kicked Mr. House's knee, causing him to kneel on the ground. At the same time, she grabbed his arm, reached out, and pulled out a black pistol from behind Mr. House's waist. Remember to be honest. This was the last thing Mr. House could rely on. At this moment, his face was ashen. He really couldn't figure out the purpose of this intruder. "Doctor, come out, continue the experiment." But how would the researchers dare to come out? She instantly pointed the pistol at the ceiling and fired 2 shots in succession. Her cold voice rang out, "My marksmanship is very accurate. Can you try?" Finally, a younger researcher slowly walked out from his hiding place, trembling. A strange scene happened. An intruder killed all the guards here in just a few minutes and took control of everything here. Someone tried to sneak out during the chaos, but the door couldn't be unlocked. Even the password was useless. The intruder, who was wearing a leather jacket, calmly sat in front of the table. She crossed her legs and looked around, eating the chocolate candy that was originally on the table. The ground was littered with the corpses of the guards. The researchers continued their work silently. Jimmy looked at the mysterious woman as he moved to Mr. House's side. Seeing that the other party had no intention of stopping him, he heaved a sigh of relief and helped Mr. House up. "Oh, boss, don't act rashly." Mr. House shook his head slightly. Then he took a deep breath and said seriously, "Help me over." Jimmy nodded and supported Mr. House as they slowly walked towards this mysterious and terrifying woman, but a look of doubt flashed across his eyes. Mr. House came to the mysterious woman and asked in a low voice, "How much do you know about the number 0 gene?" "In the world, only a small number of people carry this gene," she said slowly. "There is no pattern to its appearance, and the person who carries it has nothing in common. It could be a genius, it could be a madman, it could also be an ordinary cleaner. Similarly, no matter how outstanding a person is, they might not necessarily have it. Therefore, the number 0 gene became a gene that couldn't be replicated, but it seems that it can be artificially created. And this is the key to your new life, right?" Mr. House was silent and slowly sat down with Jimmy's help. "Once upon a time, there was a very outstanding biologist. I regarded him as the greatest genius of this century. When he was participating in the Human Genome Atlas project, he accidentally discovered the existence of the number 0 gene. But this discovery would turn the entire world upside down. He settled for the next best thing and didn't announce this discovery. Instead, he used the discovery of the number 0 gene to reverse engineer the genetic composition of human matter, pushing the human genetic chain to the limit." As he spoke, Mr. House observed the invader's expression. Seeing that she was indifferent, He continued, "This genius risked his life for this extreme discovery and won the award from 6 years ago. I was very interested in this discovery of his, so I contacted him and was willing to fund more research. But at the same time, another force seemed to have their eyes on him. The invader only unwrapped the candy again and put another piece of chocolate into her mouth." Mr. House said, "This mysterious force was far more terrifying than I imagined. But they didn't seem to have reached into China, so I had no choice but to transfer all the funds here and continue to let this genius scholar continue his research. Finally, when this research was completed, they suddenly appeared." She said casually, "And then your hard-won results were taken away by this force just like that, right?" Mr. House sneered and said, "Isn't that so?" She suddenly laughed and said, "Old man, don't tell me you think I'm one of them? You're not." Mr. House frowned. "Whatever you think." She shrugged. "According to what you said, this mysterious force had already taken away the results. Then what happened after that? You still continued this research?" Mr. House nodded. "That time, I suffered heavy losses. That genius scholar was also taken away. But fortunately, a few of his students escaped. I spent a lot of time reorganizing the laboratory and continuing the original experiment. It's just that the most crucial part was missing. I only found it recently. Only then did this research have a chance of success. I'm afraid that force has already succeeded in the experiment." She sneered. "I don't care if they succeeded early or not." Mr. House shook his head. "As long as my own experiment succeeds, it's fine. More or less." She sneered and said, "Anyway, I've seen a lot of people like you who are about to die. They're about to start searching for immortality when they're about to die. What exactly do you want to do?" Strangely, it wasn't Mr. House who spoke this time, but Jimmy. His gaze was fixed on the mysterious woman's face as if he wanted to see through her.